But, like, Parallax's claim, if he adjusts it to say that, like, the American dialect, or the, not even the dialect, just the specific common accents of the general American accent are closer to the accent that was used in, like, 16th century southern England than the current accents that are used in that region today.
I mean, but the thing is, and this is, like, before we get too far into this tangent, my issue with this is I know how Parallax argues. And he speaks in absolutes on things that even the, like, most profound expert would not put an absolute, like, on. So like, in a lot of respects, you were arguing with somebody who is creating a greater claim than the experts he cites for the things that he said. So it's like, even if he ends up being right, it's like, dude, I now have to argue with your shitty fucking epistemology along the way. Like, it doesn't fucking matter if you're right anymore. You're telling everybody a completely dumb fuck way to try and get here, and not everybody else is going to get to a right conclusion using this method. And that's just not a good thing to do, honestly. Like, especially when you're starting to talk something as complex as linguistics. But linguistic evolution is every bit as complex as biodiversification evolution. Like, it is insane how many variables go into this. I shit you not. The amount of conjugated verbs used within a language will depend how much it will be translated into a neighboring culture. And we don't actually know where the tipping point is for this coefficient. Like, it's just one of these things. We know it affects it. We don't exactly understand how it affects it. But we can see, this seems to do this. We just don't know why this does this. So it's like, anybody who's going to speak in like definitive absolutes, other than to say, no, you're wrong because blank, like, that's just, no, like, you cannot say, it's closer to this. Well, which part of American English are you talking about? Are you talking about the New England fucking dialect? Are you talking about the Midwest dialect? Are you talking about the Southern dialect? Are you talking about the Southeastern dialect? Are you talking about the general East Coastern dialect that runs from Virginia down through the Carolinas? So on, so forth. Like, all of this, like, comes into play. Like, could he technically
You talking about the dialect up there in Fargo, eh?
yeah, like, he could technically be accurate depending on which dialect he's being accurate, being more closely tied to. But he is not right when he is talking about American English, full stop. No, because that includes all of this shit. So really, Creole American English is what? No, you're wrong. Stop saying these generalities. Stop saying blanket statements. It's not good.
Yeah.
Or what's that the accent that's over in Idaho that basically comes from a combination of fucking Russian, German, and Inuit? It's like, what?
It's called.
Or the accent on that one island in North Carolina.
I thought you were talking about the. I thought you were talking about the retard out, is what I'd call it.
So glad I don't mark this for children. That being said, it's welcome to Canto VII. You got some interesting insights into the fucked up shit that goes on in our conversations when you aren't here. But Canto VII, we are going to be getting into very interesting readings. Some of these are a little bit more fun. Thankfully, this is one of the least linguistically tying cantos of the Inferno. It's one of the most
shucks.
It's one of the more fun ones to read. Mainly because, like, both Longfellow and Sayers actually know how to do punctuation in this one for some reason. And it's no longer, I have to take a pause mid-sentence, like I'm Shatner, because people just want to add commas and shit. It's like, ugh.
I'll just do it on my own for just no apparent reason.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. We are not doing a dramatic read. If we were, we've been doing a goddamn garbage job up to this point. So I don't care about that. Like, that's less material. Like, I try to work within the punctuation as much as possible. It's one of the reasons why I chose the Longfellow, because while the language is clunky due to it being antiquated, his punctuation still matches modern, like, speech patterns and dialectical patterns, so it ends up being easier to have the natural pauses where he puts them. And Sayers, doing the terza rima, well, she's expecting this to be said, like, actually spoken aloud, and I'm sorry, like, her version spoken aloud, it sounds like somebody's stuttering, like, because, like, there's certain points where if you pause at every comma she puts in, like, they become syllables in and of themselves as far as the length they add to the sentence, yet they aren't counted as a syllable beat. It's weird. Whereas normally when you're talking spoken poetry or spoken epics, any pause is actually considered a beat within the line for most people who are writing it specifically to be read that way. At least in modern times. And in 14th century Italian, they don't fucking have punctuation like we use today. Like, they have a whole different set of fucking rules. And it's like, I have the sneaking suspicion that Dante, since he was writing this to be read aloud, would have followed the same natural speech tendencies, as opposed to making whoever tried to read his fucking shit out loud sound like they're, like, stuttering. Like, I don't think he would have done that. So, like, these commas need to be accounted for if you're going to try and keep the terza rima, and I don't believe that Sayers does. She only counts the word beats, and Despy, you know this as a writer and drama person. Pauses matter, man.
Yeah.
Now,
and
just
if,
reading hers is
someone
very
doesn't,
pleasant.
Well, and if someone doesn't write them in, you can add them yourself.
Also true. But like I said, reading hers is very pleasant. Speaking hers, oof, not so much. Now that being said, who wants to take the fun first line? And I'd say up to line 21.
I'll take it.
Alright.
Pape Satan, alepe. Thus Plutus with his clucking voice began, and that benignant sage who all things knew said to encourage me, let not thy fear harm thee, for any power that he may have shall not prevent thy going down this crag. Then he turned round unto that bloated lip and said, be silent, thou accursed wolf, consume within thyself thine own rage. Not causeless is this journey to the abyss, thus it is willed on high, where Michael wrought vengeance upon the proud adultery. Even as the sails inflated by the wind involved together fall when snaps the mast, so fell the cruel monster to the earth. Thus we descended into the fourth chasm, gaining still farther on the dulcet shore, which all the woe of the universe insacks. Justice of God, who heaps upon so many new toils and sufferings as I beheld, and why doth our transgressions waste us so?
Yeah, like, the reason I had you stop here is because, like, this is when, again, in my opinion, it pulls into Dante's humanism, because this is something in the 14th century that openly doing was not considered beneficial to your eternal life. He's questioning God's application of punishment, and that like this would have been damn near pornographic levels of like scandalous to like publish at the time that he wrote this, and I think that that's worth noting at this point.
Yeah. So that first line literally has its own Wikipedia page if anyone's curious, because no one knows what the fuck it's supposed to mean. There are like 7 different theories.
Well, the thing is based on the context that we have from history, it does appear to be from that Flemish, like, what was it, nursery rhyme or whatever it was. And that would make sense, since there was quite a great deal of trade, as we were talking about earlier about linguistics with the trade, so goes the dialect. There was a great amount of trade between the Flemish and Florence. Like this, it's not definitive or conclusive, but it is at least evidentiarily supported.
Yeah, I mean,
the others don't seem to be.
Yeah, the thing is, like, the Flemish idea, basically, all of these ideas come from this idea that Dante did a phonetic inscription of in the Italian of a phrase from some other language. Some believe that the original language there was Flemish. Some believe French. Some
so this
Hebrew,
would be an Italianification or a Latinization of a Flemish phrase. Yes.
Yeah. But there are other languages from which this could have come, those being French, Hebrew, and Arabic.
But generally, France and Italy at this particular time traded over land, so it would have been the Piedmont dialect that would have been coming in, and therefore would have had a very, very different intonation. So if this is a phonetic transcription of a exterior phrase, it wouldn't match up to what's being brought in by France. The Flemish came in by boats, therefore would have been bringing in the coastal Flemish dialect, where this comes from. Again, not conclusive, but evidentiary. It holds. Yeah, it could come from these other ones, and I'm 100% glad to be wrong on this. But at least according to everything that's on that Wikipedia page, that's the only one that we have evidence for. Now, does that mean that these other people are wrong? No, they just didn't put their fucking evidence in their book, so that the bibliography includes it on the Wikipedia page, and I wasn't able to dig into it that much further. Because Hebrew, this would sound very different than the way Ancom read that. Like, like it just would. Like, even with the way it's written in Italian, like, we'd be pronouncing this different.
It's true. Like that's very true. Although the Arabic one is interesting. It doesn't have really much backing, but the Arabic phrase Bab al-Shaitan alibu, meaning the door of Satan proceed downward, which I found interesting. But given the context of the poem, where Virgil says, like, nothing this creature can do will stop you, and then declares them on a, basically a mission, what's the word I'm looking for, consented to on high, like, he mentions Michael the Archangel as having been, wow, I'm really struggling with words this morning. Michael as having been like
interceding.
Yes, on their behalf. Suggests that, like, it wasn't a greeting. It was probably either a threat or, like, with the Flemish theory, it kind of seems like he's sounding the alarm.
if it is not alarm sounding their doom. So like the other way to interpret this would be to be he's the gawker on the side of the road saying, "Slow down, or you're gonna kill yourself." It could quite literally just be that kind of statement of the obvious of, yeah, you're going deeper, you're fucked. I mean, go ahead.
We're talking about the mindless ramblings of a crazy man. And we're trying to find meaning in the mindless ramblings of a crazy man. I'm just pretty sure this crazy man is just making words and just yelling them at people. You know? Like the homeless guy that really needs help at the bus stop.
Man, whether we're talking about Plutus or Pluto, the argument we had last week is immaterial. Jesus Christ, you just fucking gutted him. Like, why?
Yeah?
Why be so mean? He's not the homeless guy screaming.
He's worse.
I mean, to be fair, Virgil seems to think that there's logic to it, right? Look, Virgil appears to understand what's being said, and being the polyglot that he is, it doesn't necessarily give us clues to what language it is. I suppose you could say it would be a language known to ancients, but I suspect that he understands it. They give him that sort of power.
Yeah, like he does call Virgil like that kind sage to whom all things were known in the Musa translation. Like Dante is giving Virgil a level of omniscience here that perhaps that is a result of his being assigned as a guide by Beatrice and Mary and the third one whose name I can't remember. Lucia, right? Perhaps that is just his, the fact that he is wizened because he is, this sage that Dante, for lack of a better term, worshipped as a poet. There are many reasons why Virgil might have omniscience. He is the guide in the story, which, the one who knows all in the story is, that goes back a long way.
Yeah, there's that, but it's also Rich's interpretation has merit because he's talking about Virgil having like just over 2.25 centuries to spend time in the temple or the Citadel of Light and basically learn all that there is to learn within the confines thereof. So it may not be a special
all things are known
power, maybe not a special power, but just an attribute of him having been there for so long. And when we get to other characters who have been in hell, who are articulated, but have been in hell for equally long or longer, they also seem to have a more prescient knowledge than would be attributed to their lifetime. So this at least, if not intentional, unintentionally implies that they are still learning within hell, even though that contradicts scripture. But that's a different conversation.
I'm curious where you get the 2.25 centuries, because Virgil at this point had been dead for like 1,200 years.
Because of the length of time we had lost access to anything but Virgil to the Greek manuscripts. That's why.
Okay.
So the separation. Because remember, when you isolate from knowledge, it basically creates a branching point. Then we had the influx of knowledge laterally after Dante's time. Now we know far more than Dante ever knew, so on and so forth.
And at the literal level, he's been in the Castle of Light for over 1,200 years.
Yeah. I was meaning 2.25 centuries for being that it was all they had in Italy for access to these stories.
Okay.
2.25 centuries, that's a long fucking time for Dante to give him to gain new information and new ability within his own head. Because he has all of that cultural, like, stories and, like, implications and weight of Virgil within the aristocracy and educational tutors around him, so on and so forth. Like
And of
all
course, there's author bias, right? Like he's going to attribute a lot to Virgil because he loves Virgil so much.
yeah, and when you said for
What
lack
of
of
how you accused me of doing that with Shakespeare?
no, I do that. It's not just you. It's a lot of people do it with
I know.
Shakespeare. My issue is we have evolved since, and while I 100% want to give him credit for being the delineating branch point, in a lot of respects, to focus so heavily on him, we are missing out on so many great minds over the last 400
I wasn't
years.
trying to figure that.
No, I know. No, but this applies to the same thing. It's that same kind of concept. Dante is doing this because of his almost deification of Virgil within his mind, his great
Well,
manning
yeah,
of
and on the
Virgil.
one hand, he's aware of this, right? Because he's kind of checking his own bias by making himself such a fanboy at the beginning of the poem. Over time, Virgil's shortcomings become more evident. So it's sort of, you can see how over time he evolved, because he never stops loving Virgil, but he over time he sees that
He
it's
sees
not
him as a
enough,
human, but he also sees him as a human
Yeah,
by the
yeah,
end.
he's awesome. Sure, yeah.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at is, but Dante did this too because so many others, because this is a natural byproduct of human tendency. And the reason that I didn't think that this was inappropriate to bring up, or that you were triggering the other conversation because it applies, this goes back to the literal human evolutionary tendency of ancestor worship. We have traced this back over 60,000 years in human history. We could trace this back to cave paintings and certain burial sites and shit, to stuff before any civilization that we understand today existed.
Still exists in Shintoism. Yay!
But that ancestor worship is essentially being applied now to literary figures, great thinkers, etc. We do this all. Now we call it great man theory. Back then it was ancestor worship because we actually worship these things into deific proportions, and we still do it. We just no longer call them gods. We just treat them as above reproach as. We just don't call them that anymore.
They still call them gods in Shintoism.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, there are different philosophers and teachers in
I thought
from
they became spirit, kami. I thought they became just spirit.
Yeah, but kami it's really hard to explain what kami is, because kami is God, kami is nature, and then
this
kami
is why I was confused.
So, to basically explain this to anybody, this person becomes deified at that point. Like, there are shrines to them.
Okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know that because I knew there was a slightly different character for kami, God, than kami, nature, and kami, spirit, but they all kind of stem from the same origin.
They're all. It's the same character.
Really? I was told that there was like a single mark difference between each one.
Not that I know of.
You know the language. I'm going by what I was told, motherfucker.
Not that I know of.
I'll trust you over what I was told because this person didn't speak Japanese.
Right. No, I'm just. Yeah. All I'm saying is that a mountain is like a mountain. Mountains have a specific surname that they're given, that it basically says that they're a god. So I mean,
it sounds very much like Shinto is based in a sort of animistic tradition where, the ancestors become the god sort of thing.
If you actually look on the phylogenetic tree, Shintoism and Taoism are actually very close to animism. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Shintoism will even take gods from other cultures, or like figures from other cultures, and make them gods in Japan. They just do that.
Okay. I'm not going to get derailed onto this, because even though I find it interesting, I'm not going to get derailed onto this.
Now I'm thinking of Shinto as like a farmer looking at the phylogenetic tree of religion, being like, okay, I'll take that one, that one, that one.
I mean, no, you're really not wrong. Like, I do this often, mainly because I know it annoys so many people who know Japanese or live in Japan. Despy finds it funny, so it actually works out. But there is a line in Mr. Baseball that perfectly applies to this situation. Japan takes everything that it comes to her shores and makes it her own and makes it perfect. That's how they view these things.
And then they never change it. Ever.
Well, that's
Ever.
that's not in the quote. But yeah, like it's just so like to them taking it in to making it their own and then making it perfect, whatever the fuck that means. Like that perfectly translates to this, like the way Japan would just steal other places' gods and be like, no, my god now. I mean, Rome did it long before Japan did
No,
it, sure.
they're perfectly fine with sharing
does
that
it.
God. They're just saying that, hey, we're just going to incorporate this with us.
Really, they don't. It's
Yeah.
not like a bifurcation to where your version of the god changes and they don't care
So
what the other
there's
version is.
I forget the name of the particular god. That's what is it that is in China, which is the goddess of mercy, who's also the goddess of mercy in Japan. And the Japanese name is Kanon, but I forget what the Chinese name for the same goddess is. And basically, it's the exact same person. It's just that it was brought over when Buddhism was brought to Japan, and they incorporated it into Shintoism.
Okay, fair. Yeah, it's just interesting because like it's like as you go into it, it's like with Rome, the gods changed when they got brought in, and they were considered distinct from the Greek gods in practice, rather. Rich?
No,
You might have just
You went-
disconnected by accident.
no, he went AFK.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to pull him back.
Yeah, hold on.
Rich, you good? Rich?
Earth to rich, or perhaps I should say, hell to rich.
His internet.
This is going to be a blast.
Well, it maybe his internet went out, and the reason he went AFK is his Discord didn't register it. Nope. There it
Oh, we
is.
got movement. Hey, he's back.
Yeah, my computer's over. I might need to reboot. I just wanted to say, as we're going, I'm adding things to the spreadsheet, just little commentary or whatever. That it seems to me that "You Cannot Stop Our Journey" is a bit of a reference to Matthew 16, Gates of Hell Cannot Prevail.
Oh, yeah.
In this case, it's talking about the gates of hell cannot prevail against Peter's judgment. So if Peter, because he holds the keys now, this is when Jesus gives him the keys. He says the gates of hell cannot prevail against anything you say. So whatever you say holds in heaven. If it holds in heaven, then the gates of hell cannot prevail against it. And so I wonder if there's some sort of twisted parallel here, by which Plutus is a kind of Saint Peter, but for Satan.
Potentially. I would have probably called him more closely related to Terminus, but this could be because I didn't draw that biblical context when I read it. The Terminus is the Roman or laterally Italian god of barriers and borders.
I mean, but that is what Peter is, right? At least by Dante's time, if not in the time of the Gospels, at least by Dante's time, you think of Peter as a barrier through which you must go in order to enter heaven, right? He's literally at the gates of heaven.
Well, yeah, like I said, I didn't draw Matthew when I read it like you did, so like I didn't draw this reference. But Terminus was what I was kind of thinking they were attributed onto Plutus here, because Terminus is a very, very
Well,
lesser
again, multiple
known god.
levels, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't discount Terminus as an influence over this either.
Well, yeah, especially with Terminus being such a lesser known minor deity, it'd be very easy for them to want to like draw it to a greater distinction, to something more well known. Like that would perfectly make sense.
Yeah. So, with both the Terminus idea and the Peter idea, we are talking about some sort of transition, right? We are talking about going. So there might be something special about going from the third to the fourth circle, more than just moving from one circle to another. Like maybe this is a particularly momentous like crossing.
Oh, I wish we had Beckett here. His demonology fucking shit would be helping us right here.
Well, I mean, we're going from the number 3 to the number 4, so we're looking at numerology. 3 is considered a holy number, while 4 is what is it?
Cardinal.
Is starting.
Like the
What
four
is it?
seasons.
Past. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more natural and naturalistic rather than holy. That's
And-
true. And also, like, if you were to divide the 9 circles right into larger categories, you would have the first third, the second third, and the third third. So you're going into the middle sins, I guess you could say, as opposed to the less serious ones, right? Because right now, what are the sins that we've seen up until now? The most serious was gluttony, which is what we just finished with, right? And everything
And
else.
prudence, or what is it? The lack of prudence.
The lack of something.
You made me laugh and lose my train of thought. I was about to look something up. I don't remember what it was. It's like, fuck.
It was pretty.
What can I say except you're welcome?
He's still riding off the high about being right about Mary.
What do you mean? He's been
Trying to
right
apply
about
it
something once a week.
I know. I know. No, I still say they're both equally valid interpretations, and mine is the more intuitively obvious at the beginning. I think what he's talking about is a deeper interpretation, which probably like gives it a lot of value because of that. We'll get there. Like when we get Eucharist or Beckett or someone like that in, I definitely want to bring it back because I want to get some outside judgment, some academic like whatever. I'm sure they'll also say they both have value, but whatever. Okay. So, but anyway, yeah, the threshold we're talking about here is going from the third circle to the fourth. When you look at the maps, is there anything special when you go from 3 to 4? Because we're still on Minos, right? We're still on Minos' back. Right?
Yeah,
Are you?
Oh, I thought I maybe lost.
no, I'm looking,
No.
We're still on Minos' back, right?
making sure. Yes. Okay, the transition here. It's not.
Maybe to get a definitive. Boccacio's drawing might not be the only one to look at. Minos is super easy to make out on his map.
No, what I'm looking at here.
Minos is that big sort of like snake creature, and you walk on his back. I think as you're entering level 1, and it goes down like 3 or 4 levels before it's over.
Yeah, at least from what I'm seeing on some secondary portions and what I'm reading here, it seems to be an implied transition as opposed to a clearly delineated transition that we just crossed one of the rivers, one of the 5 rivers. I don't know if that's accurate, but and I don't know how 14th century Italians would have viewed it. Like that's why I specifically looked up. And at least according to demonology and infernal topography of that time
Minos is
period,
himself located in the second circle of hell. He is stationed in the second circle. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but all of the artistry has always shown his back transitions through layers, so that's immaterial. That's a bad interpretation. But what I was saying is, like as you're looking at this, it seems to be implied that we just crossed one of the rivers. I do not think. I do.
Minos' back.
It's
I think Jack
it's from the artwork. Oh.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. The aspect of this is Minos' head is there. His back does transition in the artwork. It is never specifically stated in the poem, but it is done in the artwork due to the size of this particular character from mythology. It is we're talking like Jormungandr huge and common. Yeah, so essentially it's everything that's him, his personality, all that's up in two, but his back and all that transitions through. Now that being said, yes, we would technically be on his back, but what I am seeing in the little bit I just looked up is it would appear that this is an implied transition rather than an evident transition, and it would imply that we just crossed one of the rivers of the underworld, one of the 5 primary rivers, one of the 2 that are not named within the poem, where we may actually have just either crossed I can't fucking pronounce it, the Hecka something or other. It's a tributary of the Cocytus, or we may have crossed Kikaron, which is a tributary of the Phlegethon. At least according to the artwork from the 14th century on infernal topography, that seems to be the unifying point of transitioning between circles 3 and 4, is that there is a river tributary between these two layers.
Okay, so here's where knowing the Italian might help. What does Ripa mean? Because Longfellow says shore, translates it as shore, which could imply the banks of a river, or a lake or something pretty like full of water. But then Sayers says abyss, which could mean like some kind of a chasm that they're crossing. So what does Ripa mean? I mean, it sounds like rip could be a cognate, like a rip in the ground.
Yeah, so it tends to be, it tends to refer to like the banks of a river or shore.
Okay.
So then Longfellow's translation would be more accurate.
Yeah.
So that does imply that there's a river there, or there's some sort of body of water there, that it hasn't been named.
Well, that's because it's a tributary as opposed to one of the primary rivers. I said one of the 5 rivers, but I was wrong. One of the tributaries of the 5
Well,
rivers.
maybe it could be one of the big ones, because it does continue to say, this is Moose's translation now, that this river would be where all the evil of the world is dumped.
Oh.
That implies it's pretty major, right?
Okay, well, if then it wouldn't be a tributary then, and then the topography in that map was wrong. Either way, immaterial. A body of hellish, infernal water.
Right.
Whether it's a tributary or a primary flow is immaterial to our point.
So should we move on to the next
Yes.
section?
And I'll let you read it, Despy, but before we move, if this is one of the rivers, this is actually more significant than any of the translators or commentators imply it is, because in demonological and infernal topology, like each one of those rivers indicates one of the primary focuses of the world. So this mattered to Dante more than any of us or any of the commentators seem to imply. And I don't know how it would have mattered more to him, but it definitely would have mattered more to him. All right, Despy, start from.
What's
22.
the name of that Charybdis? What's it called? Charybdis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
As doth the billow thereupon Charybdis, that breaks itself on that which it encounters, so here the folk must dance their roundelay. Here I saw people more than elsewhere, many on one side and the other, with great howls, rolling weights forward by main force of chest. They clashed together, and then at that point, each one turned backward, rolling retrograde, crying, "Why keepest, and why squanderest thou?" Thus they returned along the lurid circle on either hand onto the opposite point, shouting their shameful meter evermore. Then
Go,
each
yeah, I was gonna say go to 39 before we get to the reply.
39, okay. Then each, when he arrived there, wheeled about through his half circle to another joust. And I, who had my heart pierced as it were, exclaimed, "My master, now declare to me what people are these, and if all were clerks, these shaven crowns upon us, up upon the left of us."
Okay, so like this is significant because of the implication of this culturally. Like clerks at this time were very often like not handed out. That's incorrect word. Loaned out clergymen who were basically using their literacy skills as clerks for employment in the eyes of the church. So the shaven crowns upon the left of it, like that could mean multiple layers since it's Dante, but this could mean their shaven pate that came with certain clergymen's vows, or it could be shaven crowns, meaning shaven coins, because we were talking about the aspect of like certain banking aspects would cut coins to basically steal
Yeah.
money. And I don't know which one would be more implicitous here, because Dante definitely would have wanted one to be more implied, and it would have been more implied in the 14th century. Does anybody here have like an insight as to what 14th century Italians may have viewed, which one was more important?
What again?
The shaved crowns can be an implication of cut coins. Banks used to cut like silver and gold coins to steal portions of the coin. Or it could be shaved pates, because clerks at this particular time period were loaned out clergymen, because clergy were the most literate of the time period, and the most scribed hands of the time period. So clerks would generally. Go ahead.
Well, I was about to say. I mean, this could be also what is it like a Franciscan? What is it like the shaven head of like a Franciscan friar?
There's more than them that do the shaved pates, but yeah, that's why I said shaved pates of their vows, because there's the Franciscans. There's a certain cult that comes out of Tuscany. They are in Italy, so that's possible. So on and forth. There was an abattoir, or not an abattoir, an abbey in Roma, Italy, that all were shaven. Like literally, not even the shaven pate.
Well,
they went full Buddhist mode, shaved the whole head.
Right. The reason why I was saying Franciscans specifically is because Franciscans' vow of poverty is, I don't want to say more extreme, but it's more, what is it? There are less loopholes to their vow of poverty than other orders of priests. So if we're talking about the shaven
really
crowns,
loopholes to the other ones, or are the Franciscans?
oh yeah,
just
trust me, there are loopholes. There are loopholes. Like if you want to drive a BMW that you don't own, you don't want to be a Franciscan. Let's just put it that way.
Well, like I said, it's like, is it really loopholes, or are these assholes just breaking the rules?
Well, but here's the thing, like when you talk about Catholicism has loopholes for everything. Like quite literally, there's probably a loophole for literally everything. We even have plus ones. We even talked about that, having a plus one getting into heaven.
We literally do have a loophole for everything, including excommunication.
Yes.
You can
just
be
all I'm
excommunicated
saying-
by the Pope themselves, and you can still technically get around it.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that like when like Franciscan friars take their vows, like for holy orders and whatnot, like they are in like some of the strictest levels of poverty inside the Catholic Church. Like they are bound to that. So if they're talking about people with shaven crowns like this,
Yeah.
and they're talking about Franciscans because of that, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Because then that would be the juxtaposition between the two implications, and that would definitely be the stark
'Cause-
contrast between the two that have a heavy implication.
Because you know, like a Franciscan friar, right? Like they have that brown, like that garment that they wear. That brown garment that they wear is not one that's usually made. Somebody usually dyes in it and then hands it to the next guy.
Didn't know that part, but yeah,
That is a tradition that's passed down from Franciscan to Franciscan.
the
So if you see a
undyed
Franciscan,
wool,
yeah, if you see a Franciscan walking around in one of those like habits or whatever you want to call them like that, somebody else wore that before them and they died in it.
fair enough. The part is I knew that they get that from undyed wool and flax that they mix because it's technically a mixed fabric. But it's not. It doesn't matter the cut. It matters the color. So particular sheep have to be used, and it matters the particular way that you cinch the. What's the name of that fucking rope again, Rich? I forget the name of the rope they tie around.
I keep forgetting it too. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the particular series of knots that they use to knot it around their waist that matters. It's the color and those knots, not the particular cut. So they can technically be like full, like straight up, like priestified with the collar and everything, but as long as it's that color and they have the rope belt, they're good to go. I know this because that's what a Franciscan monk who became a cardinal wore in the college. Go on, Rich.
A cincture.
Cincture. Yeah.
That's it. Yep. But no, that was the reason why I was just bringing that up, because if we're talking about shaven crowns.
Yeah, no, you absolutely could be. I was bringing it up in general because there's more than them that shave their heads. But yeah, that with the extreme juxtaposition of shaving coins or shaving heads of people who wouldn't fucking steal a coin to save their life, that's definitely up Dante's alley of trying to stick the eye or the finger in the eye of culture. Anything to add, Rich?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay. Do you want to take the next one?
Now, there is one thing I will say. And we're talking about them running into one another and like, why keep us and why squander thou, and how they're getting angry as they run into each other. Wouldn't you say that sudden outburst that they have when running into each other is a lack of temperance? Would it not be?
It could be, although in my personal expression, because we are in the fourth layer, I think that it would be more than likely an expression of their rage as opposed to lack of temperance or prudence. Because
I think there's some jealousy, right? Because he's the only living thing in hell. And people are not too pleased to see a living thing, like, I don't know, enjoying being alive. Although I don't think he's feeling joy at the moment. But,
yeah, I was about to say, I haven't got a whole lot of warm and tinglies out of Dante in the poem, besides when he got the little bit of relief of meeting Dante. Since then, he's kind of been an abject horror and terror the whole time.
Well,
but you know what this reminds me of? So it's the hoarders that are criticizing the wasteful, and it's the wasteful that are criticizing the hoarders, right?
Yeah, like the previous Canto's juxtaposition.
That kind of reminds me of the the speck and the plank, right? Like they're seeing each other's sins, right, but they're not acknowledging their own.
Not for myself.
I mean, yeah, that makes sense to me.
I mean, that makes sense. It's just not where I thought you were going with it. That very well could be it. I viewed it as the expression of rage because of the simple fact um, it's not clearly delineated, but you may get two people who would make the same accusation against each other, where they will still say, "Oh, you were too miserly," or you were too spendthrift, you were too spendy. Like you may end up running with two people who run into it because to them they may not understand one another, so they're just yelling at each other because they bumped into one another. Is how I kind of read it and viewed it in my mind, was pretty much whoever they run into, they're like, "Fuck you," and it's like they don't give a shit who.
I was going to say that the warm and tinglies is not for another 2 to 3 circles.
Also true. And even then, he doesn't get truly warm and tingly. But yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah, it's just again, just personal interpretation comes into it. Like the way I viewed this in my head was pretty much whoever they ran into, if they fucking cursed them out. They're just fucking annoyed. They're just fucking unhappy, miserable cunts in this particular area where they'll yell at Dante because he's alive. They'll yell at Virgil because of his virtues. They'll yell at each other because of each other's sins. And it could be the plank in the eye. I didn't think it went into that particular aspect because there is not a particular phraseology that would implicate that to me. But it very well could be implicated just because of culture.
Yeah, I'm gonna look and see if I can find.
You want to do next person do the next set?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just making sure that we keep going in a timely
What's the
fashion,
number?
so I don't have to.
We're at 40.
Okay. And he to me, all of them were a squint of intellect in this first life, so much that there with measure they no spending made. Clearly enough their voices barked it forth. Wherever they reached the 2 points of the circle were sundered them the opposite defect. Clerks those were who know Harry covering have on head and popes and cardinals, in whom doth avarice practice its excess. And I, my master, among such as these, I ought forsooth to recognize some few who were infected with these maladies, and he to me, vain, though thou entertainest, the undiscerning life which made them sordid now makes them unto all discernment dim. For ever shall they come to these two buddings. These from the sepulchre shall rise again, with the fist closed, and these with tresses shorn. I'll giving and I'll keeping their fair word, have taken them and placed them in this scuffle, whate'er it be, no words for I adorn it. Now canst thou, son, behold the transient farce of goods that are committed unto fortune for those of the human race and the other buffet. For all of the gold that is beneath the moon, or ever has been, of these weary souls, could never make a single one repose.
Yeah. See, and like, this kind of comes into why I believe this comes from the generic and general interpretation of Pluto as opposed to Plutus, because of in the Greek, Pluto was, or in the Roman rather, Pluto was the god of wealth, the god of everything on the earth, and they're implying very much the things that wealth come from the things of the earth, jewels and precious metals. So to me here it's like no matter what they ever had in life, nothing would ever give them that repose. Like it just smacks of being Pluto instead of Plutus, because that was a much more refined theological expression of the belief in Roman times, which Dante would have been very far removed from. And he would have had the more generic interpretation of the Greek myths science in the 14th century due to our loss of the knowledge at that point. And everybody goes silent. Southern Village.
Trying to correct a couple of misspellings.
Sorry, I stepped over to make another cup of tea. Like, because Plutus is the god of wealth, and also just one small clarification. While we typically call the god of the underworld in Greek mythology Hades, that was apparently a very early situation, because eventually Hades won out, even in Greek mythology, as the name of the underworld itself, and many in Greek did call the god of the underworld Pluto. So it's not just Roman. He also had that name in Greek.
Yes, but that's because in Greek it's a title. If I remember correctly. That's where it became that. Whereas it was still Hades, but much like Tartarus before him, because that's what their underworld was called, if not called by the individual regions within Tartarus, based on the older portion of the Titanic beliefs of Tartarus being the body of the father of the Titans, and having been cast into the earth by the killing of Kronos. Or killing by Kronos, I should say. At one point in time, Kronos' dad's body was the underworld. Then, once the Olympians took over, we have Hades take over being the god of the underworld. Laterally, Hades becomes the synonymous with the place, and they make a title for him instead of using the name. Not much different. Because after Tartarus became the location of the underworld in the ancient, I shouldn't say in the ancient myths, in their contemporary interpretation of the ancient Titanic myths, Tartarus got renamed as the husband of Gaia. Just completely lost his fucking name.
Yeah, I was going to say the husband of Gaia was Uranus.
But no, so was Tartarus. People forget that Tartarus and Gaia are what create the giants.
Okay.
Gaia. Look it up. It's also an ancient deity. But so you have Gaia and Uranus who create the Titans. You have Gaia and Tartarus who create the giants.
Oh, okay, yeah. So apparently Tartarus was the third of the primordial deities after Chaos and Gaia, and just before Eros, and was the father by Gaia of the monster Typhon.
Yeah, it gets, and this is the older thing that laterally got reinterpreted. Tartarus then became a place. Hades then became a place. As we're talking about, this seems to be a natural progression of the religious, tendency of, what would you call this? Would you call this inculcation, or assimilation, Rich?
What would I call what?
The fact that, Rich, I'll working on something else. Okay, so, in the ancient Greek beliefs, when we're talking about the Titans, we have Tartarus was a deity. Then that deity became the underworld, and the name became synonymous with the place, and the deity became forgotten. His name was removed from the legends, and he became just the husband of Gaia. Laterally, once the Olympians came into place, the Hades became the ruler of the underworld. Then over time, his name became synonymous with the place, and he got the title Pluto applied to him. And now the location is Hades, and Pluto is the god. It is, would you call this inculcation, or assimilation when you're talking about the way this evolves through religion over time?
Yeah, I think it depends on
Yes.
why it's happening, right? Enculturation implies that these are gods of another culture that are sort of being rolled into their own mythology.
older culture technically, but it's not different
That's what I
culture,
mean.
antiquated culture. It'd be like to put it.
If you're trying to respect another traditions like mythology, but roll it into your own mythology as the new context, that would be inculturation.
Okay, so yeah, so this is the enculturation of your parents' mythology into your interpretation of it. Because there was grandparents would be more accurate, but still, because this was a really rapid transition in about 80 years, according to the scholarly papers I was able to find over the week since we talked about it last week. And in ancient world, 80 years is fucking the blink of an eye. Like, that is a really short time for a sudden shift in, like, nomenclature on your deities. Like, how quick does it happen in Asia on average, Despy? Because I can give you Cambodia. It's about every 220 years there. I'm guessing it's as long or longer in Japan.
Yeah.
Like, 80 years is a long goddamn time for something to change, like, the entire nomenclature of your deities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for whatever reason this shifted, it shifted really, really fast. And therefore, like, they were trying to basically, like, bring in what was around them, because it was still a living culture at that point. As opposed to trying to, inculcate, which would then be trying to use a thing to bolster their own. So yeah. Now, that being said, the reason I point to this is because he keeps pointing to very specific wording that is attributed with Hades, as opposed to with Plutus. Because Plutus, while being the god of wealth, was not specifically the god of, like, precious metals and precious stones. Like, it was not the direct sphere of influence in that way. Whereas Hades, there is actual legends of demigods of Hades while they sleep, raising diamonds and gold from the earth, and that people would then pick up and have amazingly bad luck because they stole from the god of the underworld. Even though it was the idle supernatural powers of the demigods that brought this metal to the earth for them to find, or to the surface for them to find. So, like, they keep pointing it to it being Hades, yet they keep naming it Plutus, and that's why I think this comes from their imperfect knowledge of the Greek myths at this time, and him only having the implications of Virgil and the Aeneid.
I mean, I think it's undeniable that Plutus, the god of wealth, is a layer of interpretation here, because it's just, that's what this is, right? But that doesn't mean that there aren't also like nods to Pluto.
Well, I'm saying it's unintentional on Dante's part because of his imperfect knowledge, but we understand better because we now have access to all those ancient Greek myths that he did not. That's all.
Well, the one thing I would say, like, to your point about like picking things up that are like on the ground, like picking precious metals up that's on the ground. You look at it where it says, like, for all the gold that is beneath the moon, like, gold in moonlight shimmers and is very easy to detect.
Yeah, like this,
So
that's why I'm pointing it out, because that is specifically from the legend. Oh God, I forget her name now, but it was a daughter of Hades who slept under a particular tree, and a passerby found
Persephone?
No, it was a demigod, not goddess, daughter of Hades,
Okay.
not wife of Hades. Yeah, Persephone's the one he stole from Demeter.
Oh, yeah.
No, daughter of Hades, demigod, daughter of Hades, who was sleeping under a tree, and a piece of gold ended up in the road nearby where she was sleeping. and a king traveling by his court picked up the gold, and like one of his men picked up the gold, and the entire kingdom was cursed because they stole from Hades. Like because they just picked up the gold and they didn't wake the girl, they didn't say anything, they just took it. So it was like the cautionary tale of don't take what you don't know is yours. Essentially, is how it was trying to be portrayed as the parable. But like this legend that happened under moonlight, specifically a bar of gold, a like actual. It wasn't a chunk of gold ore. It was a buried bar of gold under the road that came up that they found. So like it points to that legend, and it's just like it's why I think it was imperfect knowledge on Dante's part, because he keeps pointing to Pluto over the interpretation of the Roman Plutus, and therefore it makes me really think that's what he meant. But because he only had the Aeneid, this is all he had to go on. It just makes sense to me, because 150 years later, this distinction never fucking comes into play. Like, there is never a confusion between the two gods when people are referencing them in Europe.
You want to take the next bit?
Yeah. Okay, so. Let me see where I'm going to stop. 84 looking about the right place to stop, guys? Or should I go to 87?
84 seems better.
Okay.
Or hell, 81 might actually be best.
Okay, fair. Mastery, I set out to go. Now tell me also, what is this fortune which thou speakest of, that has the world's goods so within its clutches? And who me? O creatures imbecile, what ignorance is this which thou beset me? Now will I have to learn my judgment of her, or now will I have thee learn my judgment of her? He who is omniscient, everything transcends, the heavens created and gave who should guide them, that every part to every part may shine. Distributing the light in equal measure, he in like manner to the mundane splendorous ordained a general ministress and guide. I'm wondering if that's a typo in the translation. I'll have to look later. That she might change at time the empty treasures from race to race, from the one blood to another, beyond resistance to all human wisdom.
So for the word ministress, the Italian ministra is the feminine of the Italian for minister. So both Longfellow and Musa translate that as ministress, basically just denoting a female minister.
Okay. And according to English, it still applies that way currently, so yeah, it doesn't seem to have changed in the last fucking 700 years either.
It's just fallen out of usage.
No, I was just making sure it wasn't like some antiquated use that was also like older than that. Like, I just was making sure, because I'm not fucking used to that fucking word.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
I was like,
same.
I had to go look it up to make sure it wasn't like a typo.
Yeah. Sayers does translate it just as minister, but if it was meant to be the male variant, it would be ministri in Italian. So that indicates that.
Like I said, it's just I'm not used to the word, and it made me question my vocabulary, so I had to go look it up to make sure. It's like wait, what?
Yeah, I would say mistress would be technically more accurate because you're trying to specify a gender.
Yep.
Whereas minister could either be male or be gender neutral.
I find it interesting that in Sayers' translation, she seems to avoid a gendered pronoun there, because both Longfellow and Musa, starting on line 79, translate a pronoun either she or her. But Sayers avoids that entirely. Definitely.
Well, you tell me, in 14th century Catholicism, which ministers could be female?
Actually, ministers several, priests none. Big difference between these two things.
Yeah.
Because ministry, well, it would have been fucking highly fucking unorthodox for just about every cultural region. Legally, can be women within the church. It just would have been culturally scandalous as shit.
Yep. I'm saying you probably wouldn't see this in 14th century Italy.
At least not often. Maybe traveling ministress would be like the only thing I could think of. Somebody who would travel with an abatus, maybe. Because we did have like abatuses and whatnot. That would be.
But when you're talking about mythology, it's a little bit different, right? So we're talking about fortune.
Yeah.
Right? We're still describing fortune. So fortune is.
Well, yeah, but he would have used the word within period context as well, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I mean. Like, so yeah, it still would have been used. It would have been legal. He would have had this understanding of it. So it wouldn't have been like. But he may have intentionally used this word to be scandalous. As we know, Dante is prone to doing so. I mean, it's kind of the whole point of this fucking story that he wrote. This is like I tried to explain this to somebody who just couldn't like culturally like put themselves in the mindset of somebody in the 1300s, and I'm like, in the 1300s, this would have been the equivalent of like the tasteful like softcore porn. This is that level of scandalous. Like, you would not have read this in open rooms.
Well, I think there had to have been a reason why he publishes this, like, pretty much as he's dying. Like
Maybe.
Like, he lives, like, less than a year after this. So,
Yeah, he may have been like, I'm on my way out, fuck it. But
yeah,
I think
I'm
it was
gonna say
more
what I
to
want.
it. I think it was more to it. I think this being his seminal work, it took him writing everything else before he could write this.
What are you gonna do to me? Send me to the pearly gates a few weeks early?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, no. The actual fear would be excommunication in this time period, because that could happen rapidly when you lived in Italy. And when you lived in Italy, like, yeah, you have to live within some proximity of Rome for it to happen quickly in this time period.
Right. I think it would all depend exactly like what is it how the excommunication went about, because a hurried excommunication is
Happens
usually
like 6
not a
times in
thing.
history. Happens like 6
Yeah,
times in history. It's not common. Yeah. Like Galileo, for example, like his excommunication took, what was it, like 8 years? Like it was a while. Like,
Yeah, he didn't have to worry about it happening like the day he published it. Also, this is what's interesting too, is in that section, he describes, obviously he's referring to God, right? And he talks about somebody who knows infinity.
if not God, one of the triune, yeah. Like, I'll give you that.
Yeah, I mean, at least the translators seem to think that it is God because it's the pronouns are capitalized. That only happens.
Well, but that happens to all 3 of the triune. So, like,
right. So we're talking about God.
Well, but the modern interpretation that the triune God is a singular entity, as opposed to separate entities, is more common after the 14th century than before the 14th century.
No, that
It's
is
not
resolved by then. That's long resolved by then.
Yeah, that was resolved at Nicaea.
Except for you're forgetting that we still have
How about
multiple
Lucius?
schisms, and just not the Great Schism at this point.
Yeah, but
we have multiple
Yeah, but
schisms and branches.
he's living in the Western Church. He believes in the Nicene Creed. Like, this is resolved. He believes in homoousia, right, which is the one essence, right, three persons, one being.
No, but he would know, and therefore all I'm saying is he may be doing multiple level of interpretation here. Is all I'm doing.
Sure. I mean, the Trinity itself is multiple levels of interpretation, right?
Well, yeah, and that's what
levels.
he may be doing here, as well as all I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just trying to add an extra layer.
I mean, he whose omniscience transcends everything, right? That's Longfellow. Musa, the one whose wisdom knows infinity. I'm just contrasting that with earlier in
What's the Italian
Canto.
say, Ancom, specifically?
Well, hold on. Before you do that, I want you to contrast that with line 3, which is referring to Virgil, thy kind sage to whom all things were known. So there's slight difference between knowing all things and knowing infinity, right? Like, to me, things implies worldly knowledge, right? So Virgil understands everything within the scope of the world, right? All those, that which we can call things is within Virgil's purview, right? But God knows infinity, which goes beyond just things.
So the Italian word here is severe tutto trascende, which literally means whose saving does transcend or transcends all.
Okay, then
so
then in the Italian it definitely points to God over the way it's
yeah,
translated.
and
English.
like the following two lines. So he whose omniscience everything transcends, the heavens created and gave who should guide them, that every part to every part may shine. So like this, like created the heavens, I think makes this incredibly clear.
And if you wanted to pick part of the Trinity to point to, I guess you'd say God the Father. But to me, it's enough to just say God.
Yeah. It's just I always look for the secondary meanings within Dante because I usually, even when I get 2 or 3, I'm missing 5 that he actually intended. It's why I'm like there's certain aspects to it where he kind of because the way this is worded, yes, it could be delineated very easily in God with the way it's worded in the Italian, but at least in the English it becomes more ambiguous where it seems like he points to each facet of the triune God independently. Due to the way that there is a non-gendered, a feminine gender, and a male gender associated pronoun with what's being said.
I mean, there's a pretty strong tradition in the Western canon that gives those differences in gender as well. Like,
and that's why it implicated it to me.
The Holy Spirit is often referred to as a she.
Yeah, and that's why it inferred it to me. I could be wrong. It's just that's why I didn't get that singular point of this is just the Father.
Well, I don't think it's just the Father. I think it's God, and God includes the Trinity.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Either way.
When I say God, I don't. Maybe you're thinking of God as meaning God the Father, but in my mind, God is.
Yeah, that may have been my own.
Avaricious.
That may have been my own modernity kicking in.
I mean, even in the modern church, God is the Trinity. God is the Trinity, and then God the Father is. I don't want to say independent because they're dependent. They're the same being. Right, but God the Father is a person. Jesus is a person, and the Holy Spirit.
Well, yeah, but you and I look at it far deeper than the average person. So colloquially, like I said, it may have just been my own modernity kicking in because colloquially, most people don't speak about it like this.
Dante's audience at the time would have been aware of all of this.
Yeah, and like I said,
it would be common knowledge.
This was me admitting that, like, it could have been my own modernity kicking into the language use and like that. Yeah, because it's the other aspect is, well, it is common knowledge to a vast majority of people in the 14th century, at least the learned people that would have been reading shit like this. This would have been also implicating the 3 in the gendering of the language in that way. And that that is actually something I was going to say earlier and I forgot to because we got to laughing about something else. Like when Sayers avoids using pronouns, there are certain times that I think she does that because she doesn't want to implicate something that in her particular time period would have damn near been sacrilegious, even if Dante himself meant it. There are times where she does this through the Purgatory and Inferno, where she will omit certain words, she will change certain things from what like Longfellow, Musa, or Chiardi will say, to where it will just completely omit gender and bring it to complete neutrality, and it's just, I have the sneaking suspicion that is her own modernity bias, or pressure of modernity, of like actual danger to her person to write such.
Well, it is worth noting that while she seems to avoid pronouns where she can, she still does use them. So in line 72, now on my judgment of her and understand, and then line 86, she in her realm provides, maintains, makes laws, and judges as do.
No, I'm not saying she doesn't use it. She just does it where she chooses to go neutral when everybody else includes the gendered language. That's what remember the expression, it's what they don't answer.
Yeah.
And it makes me think that it was her own time period that led to the pressure for her to do this, because
she's writing this in the 50s, so yeah that checks out.
And in the 1950s, to imply like a certain like divinity to femininity would have been highly problematic. So like there's certain times when I think she goes highly ambiguous because of her issues with her time period, as opposed to anything to do with literal translation or the tercerima being kept up with the meter being kept. Like, because like she includes another word there, so it's not about the meter there because she includes the neutral pronoun there instead. Now,
also, I think there might be an implicit reference here, because when we're talking about fortune, God knows all and never changes, right? But fortune changes. In fact, this is in 88. You've got this is Musa's translation. Her changing changes never take a rest. Necessity keeps her in constant motion, as men come and go and take their turn with her. Okay, so especially with that last line,
there's some judgment, Musa.
Well, I can't help but think of "Luck Be a Lady Tonight." Right?
Yeah, that's why I was like, "There's some fucking judgment for Musa in there." But
we haven't gotten to that part yet, have we? Have we read
have
that
we
part
not
yet?
gotten to that part? Okay, never mind. Sorry, I'll wait until we get to that.
no, but my issue with this is we'll get off on too much of a tangent, and we're already shorter on time than anticipated. Because part of this is God's never changing. We'll be here for 2 more hours explaining how much that's not true. But that being said,
within the context of Dante,
I know, which is why I'm not going off on the tangent. The other aspect of this is Dante almost intentionally reserves judgment on a majority of the characters he portrays, even though like he's portraying them in hell. Like the way the verbiage and like adjectives used for these people, like when he actually starts mentioning people by name, there is a certain level of he will not judge them, but he will then adopt the judged language when Virgil or one of his latter guides will use it. Like, so he will not judge in and of himself. I think it's important to denote that even somebody, I'm sure he had opinions himself. I'm sure he probably did, like all human nature is, to like he probably judged these people he was writing about in his own head. But he made an effort in his writing to avoid implicating that personal judgment. that seems to matter, because he does that all the way through all the way up until Paradiso, and obviously in Paradiso we get that kind of like less detail oriented like story aspect to it, so it changes.
Hey, you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So
Yeah. Now, whoever would like to pick up from there at 82. And I think we should go to, based on this, looks like 99 would be the next stopping point.
Sounds good. Therefore, one people triumphs and another languishes in pursuance of her judgment, which hidden is, as in the grass a serpent. Your knowledge has no counterstand against her. She makes provision, judges, and pursues her governance as theirs the other gods. Her permutations have not any truce. Necessity makes her precipitate, so often cometh, who his turn obtains. And this is she who is so crucified, even by those who ought to give her praise, giving her blame amiss and bad repute. But she is blissful, and she hears it not among the other primal creatures gladsome. She turns her sphere, and blissful she rejoices. Let us descend now into greater woe. Already sinks each star that was ascending, when I set out, and loitering is forbidden.
I guess we should have ended at 96 because there's the core division. Right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Because the poetic way in which it's written already sinks each star that was ascending. I like that because just it's referring to the fact that like it was, you know, it basically is referring to it coming to night.
Right. Yeah, that's a good clue. I'm going to put that as a time clue. Okay, so what I was saying before about fortune. So the first thing I think of especially when I read Musa, this is one of the reasons why I prefer Musa to Longfellow. Because here's Longfellow: her permutations have not any truce. Necessity makes her precipitate. So often cometh who his turn obtains. Whereas Musa is a lot more commonsensical, right? Her changes never take a rest. Necessity keeps her in constant motion, as men come and go to take their turn with her. And Sayers sounds a lot like Musa in regards to that. With Longfellow, it's less like to casual audience. The meaning is a little bit less clear.
Well, no. It's not that it's less clear. He does not imply the same thing as Musa. See, Musa implies a level of judgment and fortune. They come to take their turn with her. Whereas in the way that Longfellow is doing this, Longfellow was a goddamn gambler. He fucking understood odds. He is talking about so often cometh who his turn obtains. She is just the one handing out turns, not with her, but with the what she controls, luck.
Yeah, I just wanted it to be more clear. So here we have. First of all, the first person I think of here. This person is not named and probably will be named elsewhere, but Heraclitus, right? Like the universe is constantly changing. Like the conditions on the ground are constantly changing. Or if you're gambling, things are constantly changing, right? Which is another reason why I like Luck Be a Lady Tonight as a kind of a theme song for this character. But also,
I mean, she literally Go ahead, sorry.
But also I link Cecilia, the song Cecilia, I think refers to something similar. In fact, men literally take turns with Cecilia in the song, right? And he's implying the same thing, which is that fortune moves from one person to another. You never stay lucky, right? Like fortune's not always with you.
Well, yeah. See,
Fortuna literally is Lady Luck, and
right.
She, even in the mythology, she was known to be, I don't know if fickle is the right word, but she was very transient. And, that has made its way all the way to the various allusions to luck as a feminine person in modern
Well, but
gambling culture. Lady Luck isn't with me tonight.
yeah,
That's
but
what-
but that is the modernity aspect of it. In the ancient times, yes, she was luck. What else was she? She was the goddess of odds. Like we have to take in this aspect of her that because there are certain legends that surround Fortuna and certain demigods that meet her, not directly her.
But what
her
is she to
children.
Dante?
Um, well,
Because he is neither ancient nor modern.
well,
He's medieval.
this would be coming from like what would be interpreted in the Aeneid, and as far as I know, Fortuna is not directly mentioned in the Aeneid that I remember.
What? Oh, in the Aeneid.
Yeah. So like
Oh, hold on. It's not. That's not
so he would
his
be
only
no
reference.
so he would be drawing this from the secondary pamphlets as opposed to direct stories. Um, I don't know what he would be saying specifically, but at least the way what I looked at the Italian and what I look at Longfellow, it is not a matter of like this implies like Musa and like when you talk about the Simon and Garfunkel song, it implies a level of promiscuity as opposed like it's
Fortuna does appear in the Aeneid, though.
oh she does, okay, I forgot that
And
part. It's been a long
apparently,
time.
the phrase "fortune favors the bold" comes from the Aeneid.
Okay, great etymology to learn. Okay, so the aspect of it is there are stories where if they were able to know the odds, learn how the system worked, people were not able to manipulate Fortuna, but were able to always be in Fortuna's grace, aka always be lucky by our modern interpretation of Lady Luck being on your side.
Actually, Napoleon used to ask of his generals if they were lucky. Give me the one who has luck on his side.
I mean, that's a historical fun aspect, but I mean, more my aspect of this is like,
I'm saying he's agreeing with you. He's saying that this is really not luck, right? This is Fortuna in the ancient world too. I think this is also symbolically associated with the rudder of a ship, right? So you can't control the way the waves are going to go or the way the wind is going to blow, but you can move your rudder to change the ways in which you're using those plants. So it's not totally random. You have a hand on it, literally on a rudder.
okay, there's not a whole. I'd have to look further in here, because I'm looking at Musa and trying to look at his history. I'm wondering if he was a gambler because, from what I've looked into Dante's life, he was not unknown at gambling dens in Florence. We know Longfellow was a prolific gambler. It makes me wonder if the interpretation comes from personal context of familiarizing yourself with odds and the aspects of
But
gambling.
that may be true, but that does not seem to be what Dante's getting at here, right? Because especially here, both Longfellow and Sayers say her permutations have not any truce, right? Now, presumably, if you could manipulate fortune in this way that you're talking about,
No,
that
not
makes it
manipulate. That's what I'm
Oh,
saying.
hold on.
I didn't say
I'm
manipulate.
just saying,
fortune.
if you're going to say that there's something that goes beyond just luck when it comes to fortune, then that would be a truce. That would be a truce from the permutations. But the permutations have not any truce, right? Or pause. Necessity makes her precipitate, so often cometh the truth. Fortune's going to do what fortune does, no matter what you do. That seems to be what Dante is saying.
An alternative translation of the word here could be arrest or respite.
Right?
Yeah,
It's
Oh,
saying
and,
her
yeah.
permutations know no rest. Which
Right.
is
And-
kind of what
Which is what Sayers
Musa
says, and Musa. Musa and Sayers. Sayers says both. Sayers says truce or pause. And then Musa says rest, and Longfellow says truce. So, I mean, but either way, right? I mean, if there was if he's talking about being able to calculate the odds so that you can take advantage of certain patterns within fortune, then that would imply that you can take a pause. and that you can take a truce with
Total.
with fortune.
See, this
But
tells me
Virgil
you're not
here
much
is
of a
saying that
gambler.
you cannot do that.
Well, this tells me this tells me you're not a table gambler. No, there is no pause
No,
ever.
this tells me that Dante is not a table gambler.
No, he did too, because we know he frequented gambling dens. Like that's part of his
Yeah,
history.
but here he's making the, or at least here he is putting in the words of Virgil that you cannot that you cannot take a rest from fortune.
No, that's what I'm trying to say. Is that implication is also cat. That implication is also within gambling because when you're at the table, you cannot manipulate the odds. You have to play within them. You have to know them at all times to be within them. It's not you cannot manipulate them. It is not a matter of manipulation. It's a matter if you go with the flow, you can be within the favor, but you cannot go against the flow of the odds and win. Is the implication to a gambler. What was that, Despy?
I was just going to say that luck favors the bold was said by Sun Tzu about 400 years before that.
Oh well, that's not surprising. That's
I knew it would
Chinese
be,
literature is much older than Western literature, so anything that the West would say, there's a very good chance that the East said it.
You had just said that the Aeneid was the first place that it was said, and I was like, there's a document maybe about couple hundred years before that.
Yeah, of course.
well, and the thing is where this could have been brought, funnily enough, into the European continent through the Silk Road, through people like Marco Polo who spent time studying Sun Tzu under Kublai.
Well, no, like Rich was saying that was in the Aeneid, and if it was in the Aeneid was in first century BC. Like Sun Tzu was around what was it? It's disputed whether it was like 600 BC or if it was like 200 BC. Like so it's like
it's gone all the way to 200 now. It was just
well,
like
no,
a 50
it's
year
just
gap
that
when I read about it.
no, they're talking about just the Zhou period. Like the Zhou period is like 500 years. So they're assuming that he lived somewhere between that period because what he was writing about was during the Zhou period.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the what I remember reading, it could be wrong for all I fucking know, was that it was based on the archaeological evidence of like the first time it's quote unquote set in stone, and then they broke it to like a 50-year period, like that's
Yeah.
they still didn't know if that was the end of his life, beginning of his life, during his life. They had no fucking clue on that, but they put it to that 50-year period of when that stone came into creation, of when it was carved.
Right.
And but again, that could be wrong because for all I know, that could have came hundreds of years after his fucking death. Who fucking knows? That being said,
Well, there's an older formulation of it even within the West, which is Democritus, who said boldness is the beginning of action, but fortune controls how it ends, which is not exactly the same, but similar concept.
well, and see that kind of goes with what my interpretation of that first line goes into is you cannot get a truce with the odds. You only can go with them. Like you can only submit to them. There is no truce. That's how I interpret it as somebody who did quite a bit of gambling. And
All right. So can we get to the next section because I have to go in about 30 minutes.
yeah, and I was actually going to say go ahead and take the next section if you would. So
Where are we at?
We ended at what was it?
Loitering is forbidden.
Yeah.
Okay. So we cross the circle to the other bank, near to a font that boils and pours itself along a gully that runs out of it. The water has more somber, far than terse, and we, in company with the dusky waves, made entrance downward by the path uncouth. A marsh it makes, which has the name of Styx. This tristful booklet, when it has
Brooklet.
descended. Pardon? Oh, Brooklet.
Yeah,
when
it
it
sounds like
has,
booklet. What?
has descended down to the foot of the malign grain shores. And I who stood intent upon beholding saw people mud mud
Mud
besprent
besprent. Mud
in that
covered.
lagoon. Yeah, yeah, in that lagoon, all of them naked with angry look. They smote each other, not alone with hands, but with the head and with the breast and feet, tearing each other piecemeal with their teeth. Said the good master, Son, thou now beholdest the souls of those whom anger overcame, and likewise I would have thee know for certain, beneath the water people who sigh and make this water bubble at the surface, as the eye tells thee wheresoe'er it turns, mixed in the mire, they say, while sullen were in the sweet air, which by the sun is gladdened, bearing within ourselves the sluggish reek. Now we are sullen in this sable mire. This hymn do they keep gurgling in their throats, for with unbroken words they cannot say it. Thus we went circling round the filthy fen, a great arc twixt the dry bank and the swamp, with eyes turned onto those who gorge the mire. Unto the foot of a tower we came at last.
Yeah, it's not hard to read. It's hard to because it's like difficult to say. It's hard to read because like as you're reading it, you're picturing that shit. You're like, wait, what? Gurgling him? God damn it! That's fucking weird. He's so discordant in the way he describes it here. It's I understand why you trip on it. The only one word, mud besprent. That was that
Like,
one was
like I was saying before, this isn't no Eye of Argon, but you know it does trip me up every now and then.
Well, no, this one, like, you know, like, as you're picturing this, bearing within ourselves this sluggish reek, and you're just sitting there going, ooh, like, and before you can read the next line, like, you have to get the taste of that line out of your mouth. It's just like, because then you picture it if you're doing it right. And like, then then you get into, and this sullen in this sable mire. Well, if you've ever been to a fucking swamp where there's sables, alive, you know what that fucking smell is like, and you just smelled it when you read that line. Okay, for those of you in the audience, sables are small rodents, I think, that are really. I have to go look at the taxonomy, but they're related to ferrets and ermine. They reek. They smell so fucking bad.
Ferrets themselves, ferrets, weasels, stoats, all of them smell absolutely horrible.
Polecats. Yeah, but here's the thing. Sables and ermines make them look like fucking roses in comparison, because these things rival skunks for stench. They stink so fucking bad, especially if their fur gets wet. So now you have sables in a swamp. So now you have the stink of sables that are moldy and mildewy and like, it's anybody who's ever been anywhere near a swamp with sables or ermines or polecats, you know the scent we're talking about. It smells fucking god awful.
Putrid, just putrid.
So it's like when he's saying this, like, that's why I started laughing when you hitched up. I'm like, yep, I did the same thing. Okay, so now that joke aside, or that hilarity aside, like the way he's describing this actually goes back to why I view the previous section the way I do, Rich, because I kind of view cantos as a whole rather than like line by line contextually. And this is why when they're bumping into each other, I didn't think it was the plank in the eye aspect like you brought up. To me, it was they would cast their own sin at the other sinner with the same sin just for bumping into him. It was the rage aspect of.
But it was the opposite sin. It was because it was the the people who were profligate were accusing the people who hoarded, and the people who hoarded were doing the opposite. So
But what I'm saying is,
they never said that to someone who had their own sin.
well, it doesn't specifically say that. I think they were just casting their sin out to whoever they bumped into. It was just that rage of, you bumped into me, fuck you.
Well, it's the so if you go up, it's the why waste, why hoard, why waste.
Yeah,
The
but it
hoarders
doesn't.
were saying why hoard. The hoarders were saying why waste, and the wasters were saying why.
No
hoard.
argument. My argument isn't that. My argument is, it didn't matter if they ran into a hoarder or a waster. They would say their sin, why waste, why the opposite of their sin, rather, regardless of who the other is, because they don't know the other person's specific sin. That it doesn't specifically state that. It just states what each one says. And I'm saying that
Yeah,
they
I
would
would
say
be-
that regardless of who they bump into.
I couldn't go that far without some. Specific.
Well, and that's why I'm coming down to here, where it's the rage that consumes them. This part down here is we read
Well, yeah,
further.
but this is the second, right? But now
But-
we're out of that section. This is the second section we just
But-
crossed over. So now we're no longer into the immoderate. This is the financially immoderate that was referring to. We are now into the section of people their sin is anger, wrath.
Yes, but as we talk about with Dante, with him, it is not that he draws clear delineations for storytelling aspect, but it is a spectrum that each one overlaps slightly
course.
with the last, and that's what I am saying. That's why I didn't get the plank in the eye, and I got more. They just said whatever the opposite sin was, regardless of who you bumped
don't get me
into.
wrong. I don't think the plank in the spec is about that particular sin. I'm saying that in hell, broadly, people see the sins of others and not themselves.
No, I'm not saying you're wrong. I was just explaining why I read it in the context I did. That it was, they would say that opposite. Why did you waste? Why did why did you hoard? To whoever they bumped into, regardless, because they wouldn't know the opposite. The person they bumped into sin. They'd have no way of knowing that. So it would
By the way, it's an
literally.
interesting contrast to limbo, right? Because these are their sin is that they're not moderate. Their sin is that they went in one extreme or the other, hoarding or wasting, and that really they should have been a moderate in between the two. Whereas the people in limbo are precisely there because they wouldn't take a side on something, and that they were moderate in a different way. I suppose.
A slightly different juxtaposition, and that's kind of where I was getting at. Like, to me, this was that him in that spectrumy layer that he does, like, as you go through the circles, like, he was showing that this is kind of a symptom of the same thing. You hoard or you waste out of a sense of rage, usually with yourself. It is usually some dislike or hatred or rage with yourself that you end up trying to buy friends or keep friends through wealth, that kind of shit. So it's that same kind of like commentary that he's going into. That's how I read it, because I read the whole canto and then went back and started, instead of going line, like we go line by line because that's how you do an apparatus. But like when I read these, I read the whole canto and then reflect. And that's why, to me, that scene was visualized different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just don't see how it's not. I mean, I still think that they're accusing. They're more clearly able to see the other side's sin than they are their own. That seems clear.
Well, yeah, and that's why I'm saying.
But I'm not saying it's unique to those cantos. That's pretty much all of hell.
Yeah, and that's why I say they'd see the opposite sin, whoever was on the other side. It wouldn't matter. Like they don't see their own sin even in others, not just in themselves. So like they would cast that aspersion out regardless.
Yeah, I think if a hoarder would have seen another hoarder, I don't think they would say anything.
But in
But I
hell
think
you
they're
don't have
moving
your
in
hoard.
I think the horde is moving in the one direction, and the wasters are moving the opposite direction, and so it's almost like two different teams insulting each other.
I mean,
Something like that.
partially, but
Sort of
okay.
grading against each other.
Yeah. But no, this is a great reason. Hey, when was the last time you were in Tokyo, Despy?
Pre-COVID.
What was it like doing those fucking like massive people crosswalks when you guys like basically like weave through each other at crosswalks, like bumping into each other and shit like that? Because I've seen video of like those kind of like crosswalks and shit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you only bump into the people going the opposite way, or do they also bump you into other people going your way? Because that's like how I was viewing it as like the mix too.
In all honesty, like quite literally, I don't remember bumping into anybody or anybody bumping into me.
Really?
Like
That is
quite
so
literally, like
wild in big
everybody,
crowds.
everybody
Tokyo is
just
quite orderly. Yeah.
No, but
Yeah,
it's still,
like,
it's
quite
still
literally,
so wild
like-
in big crowds that it never happened. Like, that's just wild to me.
like getting on a train at like Tokyo Station or like Ueno Station or whatnot. Yeah, then people bump into you a lot. But I mean, like going cross crosswalks. Yeah, I don't.
Like, even
I haven't had.
those
I didn't even have
massive
problems.
ones, I forget the name
Even
of the
the massive
intersection.
one.
Yeah, I forget the
Well,
name of that one
there's-
intersection that has like that big five-way that just like
Is it Shibuya?
I don't remember the name. I can if you showed me a picture of that cam,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be able to tell you the one I'm talking about because they always pull from this one street cam,
Yep.
and it's like just
I've been
two
there.
fucking masses of people walking into each other, and then three little masses of people crossing in through those people. It's wild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the one I was thinking of, and that's why I was thinking, like, that many people, that confined of a space, that limited amount of time to get across the street. I honestly thought just incidental bumping would be natural. Like, I didn't think it would be,
Yeah.
like, intentional.
Like I'll be honest with you. Like Japanese people are hyper aware of the spaces around them and whatnot. Like
That's my mistaken, pre-assumption. It's just, it made sense to me with the way humans move in general. I didn't think it would be that
Mhm.
culturally dependent.
yeah.
That's not my bad for the mistake. So yeah, maybe you are right, Rich. Because like the way I viewed it was, I did view it as the opposite flows, but that views you to bump into your neighbor and all that. And at this point, because of the kind of like rage that's implied, or at least that I felt was implied, they just fuck you and just cast that opposite sin out at whoever they ran into, because it just wouldn't matter. They're in hell. It's never ending. The monotony would come into it, where every face looks like every other eventually type shit. Like, that's just how I viewed it.
So
as
the
I
way
pictured
this,
it.
I just posted a like an illustration, like a slide from an explainer or whatever that I found online, and it talks about them as being two different groups. They push a great weight against the heavy weight of the other group. So it seems to me like there is some sort of contest going on between groups that appear to be only able to see the sins of the other side of the group.
But is this artwork from Dante's works? Because there was artwork in his, or is this from later interpretations?
Well, it's not the artwork specifically; it's the explanation of the slide that I'm referring to.
Well, I'm
I don't
not
know
even.
who-
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know if this is from the later translations and therefore the interpretations of the people therein, or if this was Dante's intent. And for me, like, just the way it's worded, the way I pictured was like you did, two different flowing groups. I just pictured chaos. I just pictured bumping and jostling and the standard thing of two massive groups walking into each other until Despy blew that shit
But
out of
Dante
the
seems
water
to be
with.
setting up a binary here,
No,
right?
that's why I said
He's talking
you.
about why hoard, why waste.
No, and you may be right, because Despy blew my idea out of the water, because that's like 10,000 people that are crossing that fucking crosswalk at certain time periods, and if he's saying he doesn't remember fucking getting bumped, that fucking blows my whole fucking concept out of the water.
Right.
So, like, yeah, you may be right. Because, like, it's just, like, it's wild to me that happens. I don't doubt that it happens.
Here's something else from the Smith College curriculum. The hoarders are doomed to battle with wasters by crashing heavy stones against each other. So, I mean, he seems to be. I'm just randomly looking up. Like,
I wonder if the hoarders and wasters are basically on like a Sisyphus, like a Sisyphusian
Yes. Right. Yeah. This
task
absolutely
is what they're
reminds me
basically
of
running. Yeah.
Yeah, and so okay, I'll just put that down because I think that is the first thing you think of, right? Like it's a
Mm-hmm.
whichever side you think is the side that you would be on. I tend to be a waster myself. Um, you're going to go too far in one direction or another, right? So it's a
Yep.
fool's errand in either direction. What is it? The Japanese art of like making sure that you have that perfect balance where you're not hoarding or wasting, like feng shui.
Oh,
Didn't you say it would be something like that?
No,
yeah, you
that's
could have feng shui, but
that's
like
about like places and shit. This is
like
about behavior. It's slightly
to get rid
different.
of hoarding stuff, they call there's what's called danshari, and
Does
that's
it give you
basically
joy?
getting yeah that's the joy of getting rid of the clutter in your house.
Right. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, but it's called danshari.
But you wouldn't want to do it to a degree that makes it wasteful. And that's the balance, right? That Dante
Yeah.
appears to be saying in virtue would be to know when. Heidegger talks about this with any virtue. He basically says like you have to authenticity is what he calls it. There's a point at which you have to figure out what it is that you're powerful, that you're responsible for, and what it is that you have no control over. And if you think you can control something that you can't, that's inauthentic, right? But if you think you can't control something that you can, that's also inauthentic. And the trick
Mm-hmm.
is to not make a mistake in either direction. And he says it's the hardest thing in existence is trying to find authenticity. So understanding those things that you can control. That's the serenity prayer is all about that, right?
Yep.
Give me the grace to control the things I can and to accept the things I can't. Like that's for Heidegger, that's like that's the highest virtue you can attain is to understand, is to be authentic.
I remember I got corrected on that because I thought that the Serenity Prayer was the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi, and that is not correct. But
Oh, yeah,
it's a
right.
common
It's a
misconception.
20th century invention, this serenity prayer.
Yep. Yep.
But it's amazing. I think it's one of the greatest theological sort of conceits I've ever come across. That's why I think that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. It's comprised of. It was created by a Protestant theologian in the 30s.
Yep,
Um,
one of my favorites.
who just
I mentioned
happened.
it to you last conversation.
Mhm. But he also just happens to be the person who taught fucking Bill Watterson.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm no longer a fan. That fucking program has caused more fucking damage to people over time than anybody fucking will ever admit. Good friend of Bill W. Fuck that asshole.
Yeah, I still like it.
You can like the Serenity Prayer, but I now have a. It has an association I have an issue with now, where it's
Guilt
like
by
that.
association. Yeah.
Hey, if conservatives can like the Pledge of Allegiance because it was written by a socialist, I think that you can like the
Well, now I
Serenity
hate
Prayer, even
socialism,
if it was written.
No, my issue is this. This prayer, first of all, it was created after the fact, so it's dogmatic and doctrinal as opposed to like scriptural in origin. Second of all, it has been used to abuse and manipulate more people into the church since the 1930s through the AA program. So much so that one of the biggest complaints about the AA program is so many sponsors and groups trying to force people to go to church to be considered accepted into the AA group at all. Considering the whole point to the group, supposedly, was about helping people get off the alcoholism that was stemming out of prohibition and speakeasies and all that shit that came in the end of the 20s. That is contraindicated. Like this was always
But don't you think it's possible to believe in the Serenity Prayer, but then get it wrong? Like you think you know that you have power over something when you don't, or you think you don't have power over something when you do. Like this is why I've talked about authenticity. Like it's so easy to get wrong. So if a group says yes, you do have power over this, or actually, what AA does is the opposite. They try to tell you you have no power over your life. You have to accept that there's a power greater than you, and that's God and everything else. And they emphasize that, and they're not emphasizing the other half of this, which is to change the things you can. Right, and the fact that if you're supposed to have the wisdom to know the difference, that even implies even greater power over your life.
Yeah, but
because you can decide, you can determine whether or not something is you're able to have control over it or not. Right, and
yeah,
it sounds to me like they're not getting the Serenity Prayer right.
but it does the. Considering Bill Watterson is a direct disciple of the theologian who came up with it, this has a greater implication than just Bill Watterson got it wrong.
Well, could be Bill Watterson appropriated it.
At least according to what I just read there, real quick. No, he directly learned it from him as it, like they worked together on it. Like it was a thing. That being said, um, when it comes down to it, my issue with it is it's a ploy at that point, as opposed to actually trying to help. It works on the presupposition of you have zero control over yourself unless you accept this presupposition. So therefore, people who don't accept that presupposition generally have a negative outcome and negative interaction with AA, end up usually going deeper into their addictive cycle before finding a different way out. So it ends up abusing the very people it's supposed to help, unless they or want to be helped in the very, very specific way that the system sets up. It's not about helping the people; it's about creating converts. That's why I have an issue with it. Unlike things like the Catholic Church has done, in where they set up programs for alcoholics or drug addicts and stuff like this, and they don't give a fuck if you ever come to mass. They don't give a fuck about, they don't teach anything about the Bible or any of that during the classes. It's about helping the people. They don't give a fuck about creating converts because of it. Their idea is that their behavior, by helping those who are in need, that in and of itself is the testimony that will create the converts. You don't need nefarious means to do so. And this is me giving credit to the Catholic Church, which is a fucking criminal organization, in my opinion, yet they do it better than this.
I mean, Niebuhr was a Protestant theologian.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying Catholics technically do this better, and Niebuhr and Watterson were friends, according to the quick article. And
yeah, but I still haven't seen anything that says Watterson came up with.
No, worked on it together. Meaning,
together.
No, not that they invented it. Worked on it together. Meaning, I have a sneaky suspicion that Watterson's interpretation is closer to Niebuhr's interpretation than modern interpretation is to Niebuhr interpretation. That's what I'm trying to imply. I think Watterson was the one who got it right.
To advocate for radical nonviolence.
And this is non-violent. It's still abusive, but it's non-violent, especially by 1930s definition. And therefore, that's what I'm saying. I think Watterson's interpretation is more accurate to the original interpretation than what we currently interpret it as. So yeah, fuck Watterson. I've had a problem with AA since the fucking late '80s when I realized that it.
What is his name? Bill Watterson? So he was born in 58. Yeah. I
Well, he must have worked with him when he was like a toddler or something, because he was born in 58. Niebuhr was born in 1892, 71, 58, so 68. He would have been 13 when the oldest he could have been is 13 when he worked with Niebuhr. Uh, you might be thinking of a different Watterson then, because that Watterson, just, I don't know, but I mean, they lived in different times. Is all I'm saying. Niebuhr would have been long retired.
Jack, your camera's not working. Just,
Is ambiguous. It says just Bill Watterson in general. It's meaning the grandfather, not the grandson. Still, maybe it was a grandfather that fucked it up rather than Niebuhr.
Here's where it says all the Wikipedia says is that in long after the time of Niebuhr, people then used it for other things, and Watterson was one of those people. I don't think Watterson ever worked with Niebuhr.
No, the article I read said that they worked together, but it's referring to the grandfather, not the grandson. So the Bill Watterson that started AA, no connection.
I can't blame the grandfather for
No, I cannot either. It's just the name being so similar is what caught me. I didn't realize that Bill Watterson was Bill Watterson II until digging deeper. But as somebody who has a Roman numeral 8 after their fucking last name, I guess I should have thought of it.
You're the 8th?
Uh-huh.
That is easily the highest multi-generation name I have seen in a non-royal.
The first was in 1721 in Kaiserhof, Germany.
Damn.
Well, like popes, you can go pretty deep into the numbers because you get to pick your name.
And what's even worse, technically it's not even accurate. Because all of us have different middle names.
Does it have to be same first, middle, and last for that to...
Technically, by modern convention, yes. Ancient convention, no, because your middle name was your catechism name. your community name, whichever it was. So, like,
no.
Catechism, community, I forget which one it was.
No. When you get confirmed, you get your confirmation name.
Confirmation.
But your middle name was given to you. What is it? The middle names were given to people that may have been born in circumstances in which they did not have a saint or a biblical name attached to them at that time, and this is a way of enculturating people.
Okay, yeah, it's good. I knew it changed something around there, but yeah, middle names originally were given to you, like, not by your parents.
Yeah, but middle names normally either have a saint reference or a biblical reference.
Which is why I would have said catechism or community because of the commonality.
I mean, I have a middle name that's just a middle name, but then on my confirmation, I took another one. I took Francis.
Oh no!
I have George on mine.
I can't.
George was the name I took.
I can't give my confirmation name because I was that prick. My confirmation name is also my real first name. And there just happen. It's spelled slightly different. There's a one-letter distinction instead of an E. There's an A in the saint's name, but that's because that saint is from Prague instead of Germany. But it's the same fucking name.
Okay, so there's two things I want to bring up before we finish. One of them is just a small thing. Fango Ingoza, which is in line 129. I suppose the most direct translation to that would be mud gobbler, which I just really like as an insult. But I also like the concept of the fact that these people who are in Styx, they're sort of buried under the mud because remember, these are all contrapassos, and a contrapasso is a sin that basically has become personified, or whatever. Not personified is not the right word, but a sin that is like manifested itself in the metaphor of the poem. And so these people are being smothered by their rage in the way that rage smothers you in real life. Like if anyone who's like, gotten very, very angry all of a sudden. That's kind of what it feels like, right? Is like being buried in the mud. And you can't, it's interesting that they have difficulty even getting their words out because mud is covering their mouths and a little bit of like bubbles come out, and that's how the words come out. And it's almost as if, like if you've ever been so angry that you have a hard time articulating your words, it's sort of like that, right? Where the anger is sort of making communication virtually impossible.
Yeah, if we are talking about the sin I am most guilty of in my life by the Catholic tradition, yeah, this is the hell.
This would be your contrapasso.
Well, just because it takes extreme effort to control my anger. You've seen me kind of go off. Despy kind of caught the tail end of one actual bad one where all of a sudden I went dead silent and people started like freaking the fuck out.
I didn't know if you were having a heart attack because you turned red.
Yeah, it was. Rage is definitely like the thing I combat the most. It's the thing I have to work on the most because either genetics or trauma or whatever the fuck caused it. It's just it is the thing that I end up having the biggest issue with, stemming all the way, like, it's actually what stemmed that particular event when I was 12, like, when I was talking about it. I got punched in the mouth for telling, God that he was an immoral prick in front of my parents, I was mad because I'm sitting there and I'm reading this thing, this book, and it like everything in it is just like it's completely contradictory.
With evil, everyone has that moment at one point or another.
For me, it was 12, and it never fucking got fixed because the problem is everything that is claimed to be of that particular deity, that can't be explained away with logic. It can only be explained away with blind faith, and I'm sorry, I'm incapable of blind faith. Like, that's just not something I have. Like, there has to be something to base it upon. Something. Anything to base faith upon, but you can't base it on nothing.
But I really want to focus in on, right now, on this phenomenon of rage and its ability to sort of, like, mute us, right? Like to sort of like smother us and make communication impossible.
No, and that's what I was getting to.
I think
my
this
issue.
is the heart of what the second half of this canto is about.
Yeah, I agree. I was just more pointing out this is like where I'd fall into it as well because of that aspect. Where if you're in hell, like all your worst traits are magnified, exemplified, however the hell you want to say it. Like this is where I'd probably end up.
Also, you have to gargle Sablemire.
And this is how they are. This is how they are in the afterlife, right? But then they explain what life was like for them as well. Sluggish we were in the sweet air, made happy by the sun. Sayers makes it a little more clear. Sullen we were, we took no joy in pleasant air, no joy of the good sun. So, like, whatever happiness there is to be had in life, if you're experiencing rage, you don't you're cut off from that. So this is something that, like, for instance, like Virgil, although he's damned, he was capable of experiencing joy in life, right? So this is something, and a lot of people, I guess anybody above this circle, would have experienced some joy in life, right? But these people experienced none because they were overwhelmed with rage for whatever reason.
Oh man. Somebody just sent me a damn link and now I have to watch it. I don't want to watch that, but I'm going to have to.
All right, it is 1 a.m. my time. I should probably hop off here. So,
Yes, sir.
Alright, thanks for coming.
Anything you want to add
Yep.
before you go? Anything or that we need to bring up for next week or look into for next week?
no, I'll be prudent for next week. Take care.
Sleep well, bud.
Yep. Bye bye.
Later, Despot.
Yeah, like as we're going, like we keep having to jump between the translations because we keep having to point out of the translator's own biases. That's something.
Well, one translator also can make it clear, because when I looked at the Sayers translation, then I went back to the Musa and Longfellow one, and I could see it there, but it didn't immediately jump out at me before seeing that context, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were sullen in the sweet air. Well, that is a contrast, right? The air was sweet, but we were sullen, right? Or we were sluggish in the sweet air made happy by the sun. So the sweet air was made happy by the sun, but we ourselves were sluggish. So that makes it clear that, okay, yeah, this is a contrast, right? They are sort of, even when they're in the best parts of the best times of life, they can't experience it because they're too obsessed with their rage. All three translations look like that, but it helped me understand that when I saw the Sayers translation.
Well, yeah, it like as we then went back into the Italian, it then like adds another layer that, you know, like there are certain parts that we have to remember all of us are gonna miss because we're not 14th century Italians, and there's certain things that he is commenting on that if history did not record, we do not understand the reference and context of.
Yeah, even if you do a direct like Google translation, we were sad in the sweet air that rejoices from the sun. So even though we were in the sweet air that rejoices from the sun,
This could be people who are, you know, this could be, but, you know, with that argument, with the literal translation, now this argument is mental illness is a sin.
Or this is what sin does to us, right?
Yeah.
Like, so the fact, like, again, Serenity Prayer.
You
to the
know
extent
me,
that
I'm not a
mental
literal
illness-
guy. I was just being a dick.
I know. But I would just say the charitable interpretation I would give for this is I would say that is that to the extent that we have no control over it, it's mental illness, right? To the extent that we do have control over it, it's something else. It's a choice. And so I think we can't be that simplistic about how we view mental illness. I think we do make choices in the context of mental illness.
Oh yeah, I was just going by the way,
frees us from
literally.
all responsibility.
I was just going by when you literally translate it by modern Italian, what it would imply. And it's like, we know Dante didn't imply that, mainly because he didn't fucking
he might have
understand.
implied that. He
Well,
didn't understand
he
like
didn't-
21st century psychology for sure.
Yeah, that's what I mean. He didn't well, he would not have implied that because he would not have had any understanding of what mental illness was. Like to him,
Right.
it would have been demons. It would have been, you know, Satan. It would, like, so like we're talking like that context comes into it and matters, and that's why I mean it's like the literal interpretation. You know me, I fucking hate that shit. It's the worst thing you can do to any of these texts, regardless of whether or not they're biblical or just period specific, like this one is. Literal interpretations, especially when you're talking about literal translations of languages that do not follow the same language rules as our modern language, like that's never going to be the right way to go. Like we can get some contextual points from it to compare for you know other sources, but literal interpretation's garbage on just about everything.
Well, yeah. So okay, the only other thing I wanted to bring up was the topographical layer, because at the beginning there was an unnamed river you mentioned, but now I'm starting to think this isn't unnamed
Well, not
because
it's unnamed in the story specifically. I don't know which if it's
no, no,
talking.
no, it is named. Uh, it, I think. Uh, because it's just named later in the canto because we talk about Styx, right?
Well, no,
And
but
it
the
talks
marsh
about
of Styx. This is
the
the Stygian.
right,
But this is the
right,
Stygian marsh. That
right.
is not technically part of the Stygian river. That's
I'll
why.
finish my sentence in a minute.
But that's not. But that's not part of the Stygian river technically.
That's not that. That's not the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
My point isn't that the river and the swamp are the same thing. My point is that in line 100, we talk about crossing the circle to its other bank, which implies that we're talking about the same body of water. Passing a spring that boils, I mean, it's literally we cross the circle to its other bank, or Longfellow, we cross the circle to the other bank, or Sayers, so to the further edge we cross the rink, which a rink is presumably just a body of water. And then, so that means the bank that they referred to at the beginning was the same body of water. And then they refer to on this side of the bank is the swamp that has the name of Styx. So because he doesn't name the body of water that's being crossed, that we now are on both sides of the bank of, we could easily say that this is the river Styx, which also has a swamp called Styx.
Well, but it says a marsh there is called Styx, which the sad stream forms when it finds the end of its descent. So, as Jack was talking about, it's a tributary to the Styx, but it seems this, quote, sad stream, as Sayers puts it, has no name itself. It's likely too small.
Well,
and
in the canto
insignificant.
itself. Yeah, well, it will have a name. I'm looking.
Yeah, and that name could be Styx, especially given that we know that in ancient mythology, Styx is a river. So, I don't see. I mean, for lack of another name, I would just call this. I would call the river Styx as well. I mean, it's a theory. It's not. I'm not saying this is the absolute answer, but I'm just saying that since we don't know the name of it, and we know that what he calls Styx is part of the same body of water as the river that has two banks, both banks of which have been crossed at this point. For lack of a better name, I would just call that Styx.
So, okay, apparently, from what I'm seeing here, it would be the tributary Oceanus of the river Styx that borders the Stygian marsh. And this is the primordial source from which all other rivers metaphorically and literally originate, is what it's listed as here.
What's the source for that?
I went by the list of the rivers of the underworld and the tributaries. source for
Right,
this.
but
But
you're
yeah,
talking about Homer? Are you talking about Ovid?
I'm looking at the bibliography now. Hesiod.
Oh, I'm realizing this stream that they're talking about originates from the spring mentioned in line 101.
Yeah, and what I was
So
saying
it-
there,
it's-
it's Hesiod that gives that source in their bibliography, so not something Dante would have access to.
Yeah, so did Dante not have access to Hesiod's theogony?
Probably not. You didn't have access to Greek.
Nope.
I mean, maybe
Presumably there would have been translations of the Greek into Latin at least.
That comes later when we get it back from the Islamic culture, like, what is it, 150, 200 years after Dante?
Oh, okay. I didn't realize
Yeah.
when we gained that. Okay.
Yeah, there's a gap in European history on this subject that we laterally get from Constantinople and the Muslim scholars therein, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so he says we crossed the circle to its other bank. I think this is referring to the actual circle of hell, the fourth circle. And they passed a spring on the way that was overflowing. A ditch the spring cut out. It mentions made a strange path, which then reaches the bottom of the slopes, becoming a swamp that has the name of Styx. So it's as if as they were crossing the circle, they came upon the spring that flowed into a marsh that happened to be called Styx.
Yeah, and this comes from Dante's incomplete knowledge. So like we have greater knowledge than he did. So when I'm pulling out like, oh, these tributaries, he didn't even fucking know the tributaries existed. There are certain rivers in hell he didn't even know the names of.
Yeah.
So, like, he would have never have known, like Oceanus, it's just that tributary or the Hecatoncheires, and like these rivers never would have entered into his nomenclature. He would have no frame of reference for him.
It's interesting that in this swamp, so the fourth circle is supposed to be that of greed and avarice, but in this swamp he describes both those who were wrathful and those who were slothful.
Yeah, it's the juxtaposition that rage and indecision can lead to the same outcomes as the hoarding of greed or avarice.
Okay.
I mean, at least that's the way I interpret it, is that it's that same level of juxtaposition he's trying to point to.
I was often
it
told.
was just odd to me that within the fourth circle, which is supposed to be of greed, that we see those who are guilty of both wrath and sloth as well.
Yeah, I was always told that slothfulness, even though people tend to think that it's laziness, that slothfulness is actually just anything that gets in the way of you doing your religious duties. So, for instance, if you decide that you're not going to go to mass because you want to wash your car, that's the analogy that I was giving you. That would be being lazy, right? Because you're washing your car. Like, being lazy would just be like hanging out on the couch. But you're choosing to do something instead of your spiritual duty, and therefore that's what slothfulness is. So if you think of the swamp as being the thing that prevents you from even being able to communicate, or even breathe or anything, you might think in that instance of rage being an act of sloth, right? Sort of overlapping.
I don't know. I don't know if I consider sloth and rage counterposed in the same way, but like, I mean, I can see the thread. I just don't know if I agree with it.
Yeah, I'm just saying if he's making them overlap within the poem, then that might be one reason why.
No.
He sees it as a barrier.
No, and you may be right, and Dante may have interpreted it that as well, because specifically the 12th, 13th, and 14th century of Christian doctrine gets fuzzy, where we don't know necessarily what the day-to-day believers do without like extensive, or believed without extensive study. So Dante may have actually believed exactly what you're saying, that sloth was separation from the duty of God instead of just general laziness. I don't know when the modern interpretation of sloth equal laziness became the norm. I don't know. Because all of this changes over time. Like originally, or I shouldn't say originally, anciently in Christian beliefs, it wasn't any killing. It wasn't thou shalt not kill in the way that a lot of people interpret it by modern interpretations of that phrasing. It was thou shalt not murder. Well, murder was a very specific thing in this time period of premeditation. They didn't even consider crimes of passion like you catch your wife cheating on you and you kill your wife and the cuckold. They wouldn't even have considered that murder. Like, so to them, that would not have violated that commandment in those ancient times. I don't know if that's how it was originally interpreted, but it's definitely how it was interpreted by the 4th century AD. So like how did Dante interpret it? That's what's important. Like
Yeah, so I just asked ChatGPT just to see what it would say, and its first definition is spiritual apathy. Dante's concept of slothfulness involves spiritual apathy and a lack of zeal in pursuing good and fulfilling one's duties to God and others.
So it's
It
mental
is not mere
laziness.
laziness in terms of physical labor, but an indifference to the spiritual and moral responsibilities one has.
So to put this into modern parlance, it be mental and spiritual laziness over physical laziness.
Right.
Oh, okay. So Dorothy Sayers rather has a commentary here in which she's actually referring to those under the water not as the slothful, but those who how to put it, those who kept their rage internally. They succumbed to the quiet rage of like fuming. So you had those above who, for whom their rage was outwardly, they were directly aggressive, and then others who kept their rage inside and stewed upon it.
Yeah.
Which that makes a little bit
Passive
more sense for
aggressiveness.
me, as a way of contraposing two different types of anger, as opposed to contraposing wrath and sloth.
Oh, and I guess I should do this for the audience. I have said counterposed. That is different than contraposed. What they are talking about is a slightly different thing. When I say counterposed, I am literally talking about a juxtaposed position. Slight distinction, but there is a reason why I used a different word earlier. My issue with this is, if that is his interpretation, if that is accurate, which we know we have to take GPT with a grain of salt to a certain point. If that's accurate, that would mean that at some point between the 14th and the 17th century is likely when it changed, because during the 17th century we get a huge emphasis from the church about laziness, and I'm guessing that's when it changed in like modern nomenclature distinction. Would be the latter half of the 17th century.
Also, Sayers has a good topographical comment about the bubbling spring. This is the water of the river Acheron, she says, which, after forming a complete circle about hell, runs underground beneath the first 4 circles and now emerges again.
Okay, if this is Acheron, Acheron is it's not a tributary of, it is a secondary feeder of. So, you know the distinctions in rivers, right? I don't need to go into that.
Yeah, but hold on.
Well, that would just mean if this is Acheron, that would mean that might be trying to intimate the spectrum layer that we've been talking about with Dante. How he kind of he shows clear lines between the circles, but he blurs the lines with the people. And
There's a map.
and we've talked about that before as we went over the previous 6 cantos. So like that would make sense if that's what Sayers, if Sayers is right and that is Acheron.
Right. But the spring happens after they cross the first bank, which means apparently there's another river besides Acheron that's feeding this thing.
If we go by the actual topography of hell, Oceanus feeds all rivers. Styx and Acheron and Phlegethon combine to go over a particular waterfall. After that, it segments into the Cocytus and the Lethe. Like, it is, like, the topography of the underworld rivers is fucking interesting because you're talking about rivers that run in 3 dimensions. In a very literal sense, where the same river can cross itself perpendicular to itself, but it's several, like, in the myths, miles below itself in the, you know, like, so, like, it basically does, like, a big fucking highway ramp. Like, the topography of hell is wild when you start getting into the actual Greek
All right, so here's
myths.
the map. Here's the map that Sayers is referring to.
Ooh, which one did she pull from?
I don't know where she gets the map from, but this is from her book. And you can see Acheron at the top, or I guess Acheron at the top. And then you can see where it says hoarders and spendthrifts. You can see where the basically the spring pops up. So what she's saying is Acheron, which you see at the top, then goes underground and then comes back up where
Through that
Horace
spring
Spencer is.
into the marsh and the river Styx.
And then it falls down as a waterfall into the rock pool. And that's where the Stygian marsh is.
Whereas if you go by the original topography of hell, the Stygian marsh is on the opposite banks, and you were sailing beside it when you were on the boat with Charon. Like,
Yeah, so I don't know where that first bank is in this image. It doesn't seem to account for that.
I don't think you can, because I think, again, we're dealing with an incomplete knowledge from the people who are creating it, and therefore they left it
right.
ambiguous on purpose.
But whoever's drawing this map is going to do it based on a naive reading of the literal level of the poem. So if you look at the top of that waterfall, like you can imagine a left and a right side to that. So when they say they crossed one bank to the next bank, maybe that's what they're talking about. Maybe they're talking about the 2 banks being the thing that's on top of that waterfall. In which case, whatever was called Acheron, like, what would you call the waterfall?
I'd have to look up the name because I don't remember all of them, but there is a particular name for the waterfall in question. It's like the fucking Fall of Souls or some shit when translated into English. Real quick. Before I move my mic so I don't deafen you all as I do.
Or the sad stream. I mean, you could just call it the sad stream. Or as Longfellow calls it, the tristful brooklet. Or the malignant slopes. The dingy little stream is what Lucy calls it. It's a little interpretation of it.
The Wailing Falls, the Cocytal Falls is what their name is. So So this is where the cocytus is birthed, is at the bottom.
Or
of
the
these
Tristo
falls.
Rusco, I guess, which would be literally sad string.
Yeah, this is in Greek. It means the river of wailing or the falls of wailing.
Yeah, the Tristo Rusco. That's what I mean.
Yeah, this
What do you think
just-
is the best translation of Tristo Rusco, Anton?
Based on what I'm seeing here,
I'm pretty sure this is just.
I would probably translate it the wretched book.
I'm pretty sure that's just cocytus in Greek, and if it is, then like, how is that literally translated from Greek, or how would that be like properly translated from Greek?
Talking about 107?
No,
Unfamiliar with
I just sent you a DM with it with the Greek. I think that says cocytus in Greek, but my Greek is shitty.
Oh, you must have sent it to Rich.
I'll send it to you too.
I don't understand. What are you saying? Where are you getting this?
That is what is listed as the name of the falls, but I think that's just cocytus. I don't. So the river and the waterfall have the same name according to this, if that is what that
Yeah,
says.
that would be cocytus, but
Okay.
I mean, is that does God
That's-
mention that, or is that
No,
just
that's
somebody-
what. No. I was looking up what the name of the waterfall would be because we were looking that up, and that's what it's listed as.
Wait, which waterfall?
We were talking about the waterfall that
The
Either
stream
way.
that flows from the spring into
Yeah.
the Stygian Marsh.
Yeah, it actually has a proper name in Greek, and I guess in Greek it is because of context that it becomes a fall or a river as opposed to the word itself, because it gives the same word for the river and the falls. That fall off the spring is a waterfall, it's just a small one. That's why I was just checking. It just lists the same word for both, so they
So
have the same meaning.
presumably, you could, at least in theory, say that it's all Styx, and cocytus is a part of Styx.
By the way that this is being laid out, it seems like the Stygian Marsh traverses all the layers of hell, as opposed to the river Styx traversing all the layers of hell. So it's a slight juxtaposition from the Greek mythology, because the river Styx and the river Oceanus, that are the births of these rivers. Styx is the birth of all rivers of the underworld, and it is birthed from the Oceanus, and Oceanus also births all the rivers of the overworld. So Styx technically winds through all of the Greek underworld, all the way to the bottom of Tartarus. And different tributaries break off and reconnect, but it is all this. But the Stygian Marsh is at one place there. Whereas it seems in Dante's myth, for whatever reason,
Okay.
the Stygian Marsh traverses layers of hell as opposed to the river Styx traversing all the layers of hell.
In the Inferno, according to this, in the Inferno, the first cantica of Divine Comedy, Cocytus, is the ninth and lowest circle of the underworld.
Okay.
So that's literally the frozen lake that Satan is stuck in.
I'm not arguing what it is in Dante's. We just were looking up what the waterfall name was in the original topology. It just doesn't match up.
But that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So that means Dante, if he was going to call this something, it wouldn't be that. He would call it something else.
That's why I had to ask you if I was translating the Greek correct, because it's just, yeah, it's got to be named something else to Dante, because it's definitely not named that to him.
Yeah, no, because cocytus seems to,
Refer to
at least in the various maps I can find, show up far lower in.
It's literally
Like-
the bottom of hell. That's where Satan is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, this is
And it's a lake, not really a waterfall.
so this is a difference between the original myth and what Dante is portraying, which is fine. It's just it's interesting
Yeah.
because um, I knew there was a proper name for it in the way that we interpret Greek mythology, and we call it the Cocytal Falls. But when you actually look at the Greek myths, apparently it's just got the same goddamn name as the river.
Yeah, and I guess I would just call it what Dante calls it for lack of a proper name, right?
Yeah.
So I would just call it the sad.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, I was just
Or
because
just keep the Italians, just to avoid.
yeah, maybe that's all I was saying. It's like I was just looking it up because it is ambiguous, so I was trying to look up what it actually meant. And according to because I just used your trick on ChatGPT, in 14th century Italy, it is unknown whether or not Florence would have known the Greek topology of the underworld or have been creating enough the Roman topology, which also changed it.
Right.
So it's like ChatGPT just said it's unknown instead of giving me a definitive answer. That tells me it's pretty fucking up in the air because it tries to give you a definitive answer pretty much all the time if it can.
So I guess I would just say Tristo Rusco
Yeah.
is what I would call it for now, because I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah, and that works. My Latin's better than my Greek. I wish my Greek was better. The problem is learning Greek's a pain in the ass because it's more contextually based than word based. It's so weird.
Yeah,
I would never
think
try to
that-
learn it all. Like I wouldn't start over at my age.
I don't think Tristo Ruscal is supposed to be a name. So
No,
much
it's
as
not.
No,
a
we're just
description.
yeah, but we're gonna just use that Italian to delineate it since we do not have
Because it's
the
not
proper
named,
name.
we need like a placeholder for it.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
seems to me the best one would be the words he uses to describe it. But
Yeah,
we don't. Just like before, we also have the what was I put before the La Dolente Ripa, right?
yeah,
Which is the first, which is the bank of the river that they come across, or the bank of whatever body of water they're coming across. So La Dolente Ripa is presumably the bank of Tristo Rusco, and I don't mean either one of those to actually be proper names, but they're
yeah.
they're just words that we have that can refer to them topographically.
Yeah, basically, because Dante did not either know the name or choose to name it, we are choosing to create a delineating mark for our own notes to make it easier. Is all. Nothing more.
I mean, in theory, you could also call it just sticks.
Yeah. Although I think that's inaccurate because we have so many rivers in the under. That's my point. Like, I don't know if it's inaccuracy or choice. Like, did he not know? Or did he choose to change it to because this particular topology allowed for better social commentary, or greater political commentary, or greater religious commentary? Considering he does all of that all of the fucking time. Ugh.
I mean, presumably, like the very fact that people refer to it as the Stygian swamp implies to me that the swamp, not all of the Styx is a swamp.
Mm-mm.
This is the Stygian swamp as opposed to the Stygian stream or the Stygian waterfall or
Yep.
whatever. It could be that that's the case.
Yeah, and that's how it's delineated in the Greek myths, is that there is a Stygian marsh, there's the river Styx, there is tributaries and feeders of the Styx that all have specific names. Like, there's a tributary of the Cocytus called the Hecadantetas, which is where... Do you remember the 100-handed ones from Greek mythology?
No.
They were basically children of Poseidon, kind of like the Cyclopes, but instead of having one eye and being massive creatures, they had 100 set of arms and 100 sets of eyes, and they operated the forges of Poseidon. And this is where
Presumably they have a big visual cortex.
Um, not really described in the myths, but I would assume pretty much everything in the middle of them is a brain. Yeah. Because you'd also need like a motor cortex the size of a fucking African elephant to do this.
Yeah. Sure.
But that being said, this is supposedly, according to Greek myths, if they end up in the underworld instead of in the Elysian fields of Olympus, this is where they end up, is on the banks of this particular river, beating big rocks into smaller rocks for all eternity.
That's a pretty interesting description of the Earth's mantle. Like,
Didn't think
what
of it
is
that
this-
way, but accurate, yeah.
I mean, like, rocks are getting smaller until they literally just become liquid.
No, I mean, like, I didn't think about it, but yeah, that's an interesting poetic way to view it. Yeah,
I mean,
it's
accidental, of course. He wouldn't have known anything about that.
yeah.
Well, he might have known a little bit. He might know that as you get deeper into the Earth, things get warmer.
He may have known that magma becomes rock, and therefore
Yeah, he might. Surely they knew about volcanoes back then. Yeah.
like he may have just been like, or he may have been building it off the myths that also knew some of this shit, and he just found a poetic way of wording what they said better, kind of thing. Yeah, it definitely works though.
Hancom, what's your rank?
That would be
What?
lieutenant.
What's your rank? Lieutenant?
My rank?
You have
Yeah, I
two pips
just-
on your neck.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You forgot what you were
I didn't
wearing.
even realize you were talking about my shirt. Yes.
Oh wait, no,
Yeah,
no,
actually,
lieutenant commander. I see the half pip.
Yeah, it's hard to see on camera, but
Yeah, so lieutenant commander.
oh yeah, there it is. Yeah, little half pip. It used to be like gold outline there, but that gold flaked off. But yeah, it was supposed to be lieutenant commander.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I kept seeing the two pips. I didn't see the dot till you actually held the collar up. So that's
Yeah.
why I instantly said lieutenant.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like the gold on that bit just flaked off since I got it. But yeah, it was originally lieutenant commander.
Yeah, 2 pips is lieutenant senior grade. 2 pips and a half pip is lieutenant commander. 3 pips is commander.
Commander, 4 pips is captain, 1 pip is ensign, 1.5 pips is lieutenant junior grade, and no pips is just colonel.
Or cadet.
No, cadets have their own pips. They're usually
Unless they're
longer
assigned to.
stripes, and they indicate your number of years in the
Yes, but
your
they,
year
but,
level
but,
in the
but,
academy.
but when you were assigned to a starship, you do not wear your cadet rank on the starship because you were considered crew. The Ensign Nog covered this during the battle on the Defiant. He had to take his rank
Presumably, a
off
lot
as
of this will
as he
get worked
entered the
out
bridge.
when Starfleet Academy comes out. 'Cause
Well,
we've
that,
never really spent a lot of time with Academy ranks.
well, but that's also going to be Academy in the future. But the reason I say this is Nog has to take his rank off as he enters the bridge of the Defiant during.
Well,
the
sort
movie
of
course.
Academy in the future, right? But as they're rebuilding the Academy, presumably they're going to need Tilly to explain what the Academy was like back in her day, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there are going to be things that they've forgotten. And she's going to
Well,
be
'cause-
no, this is how it works.
I didn't think
Yeah.
about that.
Because
Yeah.
I'm thinking we don't see academia.
Tilly's
God, I
the main
miss
character
Tilly.
in that show,
I
apparently.
miss
we don't
Tilly
see
so
cadets on starships a
Yeah.
ton. However, in this newest series of Prodigy, we do, and they all seem to have their pips as well as their Nova Squadron insignia.
Yeah, and I noticed that, and it's one of the things that bugged me because, like I said, Nog during that he was a cadet. You know the one I'm talking about where he had to basically act as the fucking communication system.
Yeah, I remember that episode. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had to take it off when he entered the bridge because he was still a cadet, not a officer, and that would have basically because in DS9 it was the same fucking dots. There was no difference.
I'll actually have to go back. In fact, I can do that right now.
They don't
Just
say
look
anything.
for
He just
spices.
takes it. He just takes it off as he gets on the ship.
Interesting. What was the name of that episode?
I'd have to go look up the list. I just
Yeah.
remember. I just
I
remember
mean,
it
it
as.
makes sense that they would.
I just remember it as the time that Nog operated as the PA system. Because, like, everything else about that episode is utterly forgettable, except Nog had to communicate everything, including fucking Cisco telling people to get to fucking work.
Yeah.
He's like, I can't say that, sir. I will say this. That is the one thing that they did best, in my opinion, in DS9. They made the epitome of Starfleet a fucking Ferengi.
Yeah. And he gets a ship named after him in the far future.
Yeah, like
I want to know what he did to get that honor.
I don't think we'll. I hope we get to know.
No, I mean presumably it was something after DS9, right? So.
Well, see, I don't think we'll ever get to
probably
truly
became a famous captain and whatever. I don't know. Maybe he negotiated some trade.
I thought he left Starfleet after a certain point in DS9. I could be mistaken. I thought he basically left.
No, so because sorry, one second. Because
he lost his leg and all that.
MMO and having
Oh.
remember
Fleet
but
or
because
commander
that's
or whatever it
canon,
is.
he's actually featured as a captain in that game.
Okay. Something I didn't know. Okay, gotcha. I didn't know that because I never played that fucking game. Well, let me rephrase that. I played it. I didn't play it enough to fucking find out all the Easter eggs that they included in it.
I mean, the last known, like in canon, the last known rank he had was Lieutenant Junior.
Yeah, and I thought because he lost his leg and he was going through all that PTSD, we go through that episode with Vic and all that, and he's always different after that. And near the end of DS9, he is seen out of uniform, and he's wearing the old Ferengi clothes, and it always made me think that he left Starfleet for whatever reason, because he couldn't cope with the violence and the shit that happened, when he lost his leg, whatever it was. But, like, that's how I always, like, read it, is because when you saw him in the Ferengi clothes, it was just kind of like...
Well, he doesn't necessarily have to stay in Starfleet. He could have done something great as a...
Well, no, according to what Ancom just told us, he was a Starfleet captain, so he didn't leave Starfleet. Yeah, but that's canon.
Yeah. That kind of canon usually slips in and out of canonicity. Who knows if it'll be canon in 30 years,
Okay, I mean, fair enough. But, yeah, like, I just always thought that he left because of that. Because he was always different, even though, like, he got better, like, after Vic basically told him get the fuck out. He got better, but he was always different. And then, I think it was either the last episode or second to last episode, it was one of the, I think it's the last time you've seen Nog, specifically. Like, in the background, not when he's a foreground character, in the background you see him walking along with Quark and he's wearing the old Ferengi clothes, and I just always interpreted that as him.
I mean, it could be. He must have done something great, right, for the Federation. Or for Starfleet. Or both.
Or died.
Yeah.
Could have died in combat or something.
I'd like to
that.
think that maybe this is just too much of a stereotype, but I would like to think that he negotiated some trade deal like it saved a bunch of lives because of the trade deal or whatever. Or because that was named as his greatest strength, right? Was that he would take like Ferengi practices or whatever and would sort of like make them useful for the Federation in one way or another, like
Well, like when he did the fucking dipshit bargaining for the dead body of that fucking Vorta.
Yeah, yeah. I thought it was pretty funny. Isn't that how he passes? Isn't that how he? Doesn't he come? Isn't he like the only person since Kirk to pass the whatever that stupid
Kobayashi Maru?
Kobayashi Maru, because no one at Starfleet, it never occurred to them that he could negotiate his way out of it, and somehow it works.
I don't remember that, but it could be.
I gotta find out. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. But I think that would be an excellent way to. Kobayashi Maru. Let's see.
Yeah, he beats
He
the
did.
Kobayashi Maru. Yeah. Oh, but it happens in the comic book series. Okay, so technically
it's
canon
it's
at the
not.
time it was
so
made, but it might not be
with
canon anymore.
within the show, the last thing we know of Nog is that prior to Cisco joining the Prophets, one of his last official acts was to promote Nog to Lieutenant Junior Grade. So as of the end of DS9, he's still in Starfleet.
Okay, yeah. It's just he was wearing the old Ferengi clothes. Especially him walking with Quark like that, it just made me just think that. Oh, well.
He is okay. This comic book episode is listed in Memory Alpha, not just Beta, which implies that at least by their standards, it is canon. And he's one of the main characters in the short story "The Bottom Line." In Strange New Worlds anthology, we see how he handles the famous Kobayashi Maru character. That's interesting. Because Strange New Worlds is long before DS9. But I guess they, I don't know,
Yeah, that's interesting.
the bottom line is what it's called. But I think it's cool. And according to the Kobayashi Maru page, Cadet Nog solves it in two entirely